Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku were the first quirkless student in the hero class. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Shota Aizawa was a teacher that most people figured didn't care about others, and cared for her students least of all. Based on the way she treated them when the other teachers were present, they figured she was only harsher on them when they weren't. What they didn't know was that when she seemed to be sleeping during or before class, she was usually only pretending. Why she wasn't sleeping is something she hopes no one will ever find out. She was watching over her kids. While they may be her students, she protected them and cared about them like they were her own kids. What she had no possible way of knowing was that the students that were about to enter class 1 would be the class that she got the most attached to and would impulsively jump into a fight that she could never possibly win just to protect them. Honestly, if she could tell her past self anything before that year started, it would be that this year would be a huge pain in the ass and also would be an extremely rewarding yet very stressful experience and would possibly give her what she had always wanted. We start 2 days before the entrance exams. Shota was dreading the beginning of the new school year. Yes, she did love her job most of the time. She did in fact care about her students. The reason that she was so uneasy about the beginning of the school year is because she would have a new homeroom class this year. At UA, a teacher is assigned to a first-year class, then stays with that class until that class's graduation. It gave the students a sense of stability in a school environment that was constantly changing around them. Because of the system for homerooms, she hadn't had a new group of kids in 4 years now, and she was a bit nervous about having new students. She was always a bit apprehensive going into having a new class because she was a female hero and an underground hero to boot. Because of that, she was often looked down on by others for working outside of the spotlight and avoiding media attention. She was also often told that she was too fragile or delicate to be doing such dangerous work by students. Hell, one of the other teachers had looked down on her for working underground and being a female hero. He had said that female heroes should be more like figureheads and should only do work in the spotlight where they could be seen. Shota disagreed, but she couldn't change his mind. She usually found that students who thought that way had zero heroic potential or were simply trying to become a hero to get close to those of their preferred gender for unsavory reasons. So they were usually expelled very quickly. The teacher, however, was just an annoying man who she avoided when she could. Unfortunately, because of her expelling her whole class last year, she was on the same class schedule now, so he would be teaching the other first-year heroics class. She was almost sorry that she had expelled those kids even though they had no real heroic potential, just to get out of teaching with Vlad as the other first-year teacher. She would rather Nezu himself be teaching that class, which was saying something since she knew how those kids would turn out, and they were always a bit scary even to those who had been Nezu's personal students in the past. She was also kind of annoyed because she had to help observe the entrance exams this year since the school board was doing entrance exam observation and most of the UA observers were lenient with the kid. The only kid Shota was ever even a little bit lenient with during the entrance exams she did observation for were the kids whose quirks only affected people, and even that leniency was extremely small. Because of the way the entrance exam was set up, it was unfairly biased towards those with physical strength and destructive quirks. Those with mental quirks had a very hard time passing the entrance exams. She was often asked why she was so adamant that the entrance exam needed to be changed to be less biased towards physical quirks. The reason was that she herself had been unable to pass the entrance exam because her quirk, Erasure, only worked on quirked humans, not robots. She had entered the hero course a few weeks into first year from Gen Ed, which had never happened before, since Gen Ed kids never won the sports festival and earned a spot in the hero course. Once she became a teacher, she questioned Nezu as to why the entrance exam was so biased, and the conversation ended up giving her a shocking realization about the power Nezu held. There were some things that even he couldn't change on his own. He needed more support from the board and other teachers, which he very rarely got, especially on the topic of the entrance exam. Most of the teachers were fine with what they had currently, and the board didn't want the hero course full of those with what were considered villainous quirks. The teachers who wanted a change were those who had mental quirks like Nezu, or quirks that only worked on humans like herself and Nimiri. So really it was just the teachers who would be unable to pass the entrance, relying only on their physical abilities. Shota told Nezu that he had her support when he needed it to pass courses of action. This realization of a change in the entrance exam being highly unlikely is what led to her talking to Nezu about making a new class a few years ago. She always kept an eye on the kids who she would recommend to Nezu go into the small class of kids that would probably make good underground heroes in the future. When she watched the recordings of the practical entrance exam, she found the kids who were better suited to underground or reconnaissance work and gave the list to Nezu to enroll in the class. This also meant that she could pull kids into the hero course straight from entrance exams as well if she felt that it was where they should be. She had only done this once before, and now that kid was a well-known hero and was full of hope for the future. This was also the easiest way to get kids switched into the hero course if needed, because they would already have experience with combat and tactical training while also having been enrolled in UA already, so they would just be switching classes. She had moved a few kids into the hero course from the underground class before because they needed the connections or the influence of a daylight hero. She also had students in the past who were in both classes, taking the required classes and homeroom with the hero course, and did their heroics training and tactics with the other class. However, this situation was extremely uncommon and had only happened a few times and had gone rather well. And the kids had always been able to keep up with both classes, and when the whole grade joined together for a joint foundational heroics or tactics lesson for the first time, usually during their first year but sometimes later on, it was always a fun training to observe. The kids in the underground class were always the ones who people thought they would be able to destroy quickly since they had never seen them for any classes before. But the underground kids almost always dealt with the daylight hero kids swiftly and efficiently. The only times they didn't was when they all had to work together on something. It was generally a humbling experience for the daylight hero course kids. There were a few times that the limelight hero kids had won during joint combat training, but those were rare occasions. Shota was lost in thought, trying to work out the changes that she should make to the program to help sharpen the skills of the kids in the underground class and keep them on their toes. That's why at first she didn't notice that her name was being called as Nezu tried to get her attention. They were in his office talking about her involvement in the entrance exams. She brought her attention back to the rat. So Eraser, now that I have your attention again. I know that you greatly dislike coming in to observe entrance exams, but I do believe that having you there will appease the school board and the commission for the next few years, and you can go back to observing recordings after this year. The rat mouse thing said, "It's fine, Nezu. I'm aware that you are having me do this out of necessity for pleasing the board and not out of much personal desire for me to do this. I will do it so that the board leaves us alone, and because I know that it will also please you since you do seem like you have some interesting hero course applicants this year." Shota responded, "Indeed, I have noticed some interesting students this year, and I'm excited to see what you think of them." Nezu told her, "I don't know whether I should be afraid or excited," Shota said, mostly talking to herself. "Probably a bit of both if I'm going to be honest. But anyway, do you have any other concerns, or is it about time for you to go?" Nezu asked. "I do believe that we are done here, so I will take my leave. See you on Wednesday, Nezu," Shota said. She stood up from her seat at Nezu's desk and headed out of his office. Shota sighed, not really wanting to go back to her apartment, but it not being nearly time for her patrol to start, seeing as it was only early afternoon. So she chose to go to the nearby cat cafe to pass some time. As she sat down at a table in a more secluded corner of the shop and ordered a coffee, she started to let her thoughts wander back to the class of kids who worked on underground heroics training, keeping up her awareness of her surroundings. That's how she sat for a while, petting the cat who had curled up in her lap at one point and humming softly to herself. She began making a plan for the second and third years, and left planning for the new first years to after she knew who she had to plan for and what they would need to work on based on what she would see from those taking the exam on Wednesday. Eventually, it was time for her to go back to her apartment and get ready for patrol. That night was a slow one. Not a lot of petty crimes or murders looking for victims. Honestly, she should have noticed that it was almost too calm. Around 3:30 in the morning, she ended her patrol and went back to her apartment. The next day was spent making actual lesson plans for the underground class and looking over what the second years had needed last year to try and make a rough idea for what she could provide to the teacher for that class for the new first years. She was the only underground hero that taught at UA, however she did enlist the help of some other underground pros to give certain lessons if that was their specialty and they had the time. She rarely taught the class herself, since she had a limelight hero class to teach and she was one of the hero history teachers, so her day was relatively busy. She did teach a few of their classes, but the vast majority of them were taught by other underground pros. Wednesday morning, Shota woke up slightly better rested than usual, mostly because she didn't have patrol the night before. She started to get ready, rather unexited that she had to go observe entrance exams, but she was completely resigned to the fact that she couldn't get out of it. She arrived early as per usual. For her, she was one of the first teachers on campus in the mornings as well. She sat in the teacher's lounge and waited to be called, most likely to wherever they were doing observation from. Slowly, the other teachers who did observations started to arrive. Shota knew they were there before Mike started shouting for God knows what reason, but that definitely confirmed they were there. Once all the teachers and recovery girl arrived, Nezu called all of them to the observation room. Most of them would wait in there for the time it took for the hero course applicants to do the written exam. Those who proctored the written exams split off to where they had been assigned. Thankfully for Shota, this meant that Mike was off to wait for those taking the written exam for the hero course. She decided to take a nap until she actually had anything she needed to do. She sat down on one of the chairs in the observation room and fell asleep. She woke to the feeling of someone shaking her gently. As soon as she opened her eyes enough to see who was waking her, she heard their voice. Shota dear, we are going to get started in a few minutes. You need to wake up now. It took Shota a moment to place the voice since her sight was still blurry enough from sleep that she couldn't recognize faces, but replied as soon as she placed the voice. Thank you for waking me up, Chio. Of course, dear, she said. Shota moved to stand in the back where she could see well but still be concealed in the shadows. Shota noticed the group of commission staff who were huddled together in a few chairs off to the side of the rest of the observers. Suddenly the screens in the observation room flicked on and the slight murmur of voices in the room died. They then saw a large group of teens standing in front of a set of doors and could hear Mike start the exam. A pair of kids were smart and darted in as soon as the doors opened, but the rest just stood there as if waiting for something. One kid turned to Mike and yelled, "Present Mike, sir, shouldn't they be disqualified for not waiting for the countdown?" Mike called down in response, "There's no countdown in a real battle, so what are you waiting for? Go, go, go." This shocked the kids and they stood there for a moment before rushing in to deal with the robots. As Shota watched, she was looking more so for kids who would fit the underground program than judging entrance exams. Eventually a pair of kids caught her attention. Shota stepped forward and sat down in the empty chair beside Nezu and asked him a question. "Who are the green and purple-haired kids?" Shota asked. "The green hair belongs to one Izuku Midoriya, and the purple is Hitoshi Shinso," was his response. "How are they doing? Because to me it seems that they are working together, which usually doesn't go super well for those doing it," Shota inquired. "Rather well, actually. The pair is working together to distract the robots, and then they use some sharp ruble they found to cut the wires inside the robots, alternating who deals what would be the killing blow so that points are given to both of them," Nezu said. Shota was shocked by the resourceful thinking and the ingenuity these teens had and watched them for a while. Eventually she heard the call for the zero-pointer to be released onto the field. She watched as everyone ran away but then grew concerned when she heard someone crying out for help. Some rubble had fallen on a kid and she would soon be crushed by the zero-pointer. Shota was about to yell for them to deactivate the zero-pointer when she saw a flicker of green and purple at the edge of the screen. She watched in shock as the pair scaled the robot with ease as if they had done it a million times. The pair managed to cut the wire that allowed the robot to move and then skittered right back down to help the girl. Mike then called the end of the practical exam and told those who were injured to go see Recovery Girl. "Well, are you regretting not faking being sick and avoiding coming to observe the entrance exams, Eraser?" Nezu asked. "Not at all," Shota replied, still a little stunned at what she had just seen. "Well, I do believe that you need recordings and files for looking for students for the underground class. And you also want to learn more about Midoriya and Shinso, don't you?" Nezu said matter-of-factly. "You would not be incorrect," Shota sighed. After this exchange, Shota got the files and recordings from Nezu and left for her apartment. She was sitting in her office and reviewing the files and recordings that she had gotten a few hours ago and had found a few kids who should go into the class, but there were two who she was unsure if she should place in the class: Shinso and Midoriya. She wanted to put them in the class, but she also thought that they would probably be better off with herself as their tactics instructor, which fell on the homeroom teacher of a class unless the teacher was extremely unqualified for the job, such as Vlad. The only other exception to the homeroom teacher teaching tactics was the underground class, in which they had a hero who specializes in tactics and similar behind-the-scenes work teach the class. So she decided to put 6 kids in the underground class and talk to Nezu about the other 2. She called Nezu to tell him which 6 to put in the underground class and then brought up the 2 kids she had been wondering about. Nezu's opinion was that he could put them both in her class and there could be some lessons they would take with the underground class but would take most foundational heroics and tactics classes with one. Shota found this a good compromise and told Nezu to go through with that. However, Nezu told her that since she had been the one to make their class schedules awkward at times, that she would be the one to do the projected message to students informing them on what class they were in and where to go on the first day of school. She was less than thrilled, but the choice made sense and was logical, so she would in fact go through with it. The next day, Shota went to UA to do the recorded message for the acceptance letter and told the 2 to come to class about an hour and a half early on the first day of school. After the videos were done, Nezu gave her the files of the students that would be in this year's Class 1 so that she could get to know their names, faces, and quirks. She also had a habit of asking Nezu for all available reports from all other levels of education so she could see if they had a diagnosed learning disability or difficulty, and if not, then if there could be one that has gone undiagnosed. According to Nezu, she was the only teacher who did this for students. Nezu provided her those reports as well as their high school application, which had a written reason to want to go to their chosen school. She went to the WhatIf classroom to start going over the files and arranging a preliminary seating chart. She also needed to get her stuff on her desk and set up the classroom arrangement. She preferred the students having their own desks instead of communal desks made up of several different desks like some teachers did. She took notes on any students who had past problems with other classmates and which students seemed to have a rough home life so that she could pay extra attention to them. She was impressed with these kids. Pretty much all of them had a strong and well-thought-out reason to become a hero, and most had nearly perfect grades. Most of them also had nearly spotless disciplinary records with glowing recommendations from teachers. However, there were two kids who stood out for the rest, Shinso and Midoriya yet again. They had come from different junior highs, but they were both said to be huge bullies, always starting fights, slacking off in class, and disobeying the teacher. One thing that was different in Shinso's file was that he was marked as having used his quirk on other students at times. However, what Shota found most disturbing was the lack of other students bullying them. That might sound weird and like a terrible thing to think out of context, but Shota noticed that Shinso had a brainwashing quirk which would normally be a huge target for bullying due to having a villainous quirk. But Midoriya would have an even bigger target on his back because he was quirkless. Now the way they had dealt with the robots during the entrance exam made all the more sense. They didn't use their quirks because they couldn't, either because it wouldn't work on robots or that they didn't have one to use to begin with. She was glad that they passed the entrance exam and that they were still alive, since they were both almost at the age most people like them don't get past due to bullying and discrimination. Well, she would definitely get to the bottom of this extremely probable case of discrimination, which would explain their files really quite well. But for now, she needed to get ready for the beginning of the school year and all the stress that came with it. We now jump forward to the morning of the first day of school. Shota woke up to her alarm and almost hit snooze. She didn't need to be at UA more than like 30 minutes early, right? Then she remembered that Shinso and Midoriya would be at school an hour and a half early as requested by Nezu and herself. Shota sighed, getting up and turning her alarm off. She really didn't want to be up yet. She had gotten stuck at the police station doing reports for longer than she had planned to, so she had only been asleep for a few hours. She nonetheless moved to get ready for the day, making sure that she had everything she needed in her satchel before she left. Then she remembered to grab her notes on her student files off her desk. She had their actual files in the drawer of her desk at school, but her notes would make it easier to find what she needed quickly. She lived close enough to UA that she could walk to campus, so that's what she did. Well, kind of. As soon as she exited her apartment, she went up to the roof and started to move across the rooftops, which was much faster than walking along the sidewalks. No other people were up there to slow her down. She arrived at campus in about 10 minutes. She went in and entered the classroom with about 15 minutes until the two were supposed to arrive. She placed her student notes on her desk as well as her laptop. She hung her satchel on the hook under the desk, and she placed a neatly folded sleeping bag alongside it. She pulled Shinso and Midoriya's files out of her desk drawer and placed them in front of her. She also grabbed the rest of her student files and placed them off to the side of her work area. While going over them and humming softly, she heard the door slide open in soft speech, as if those talking were afraid of being overheard. She set down her pencil and turned toward the new arrivals. When the two realized that she was there by the sound of her humming, seeming to have not expected her to be there yet, they turned to look at her apprehensively and their hushed conversation stopped. When her gaze landed on them, they both flinched a little, and she felt that her suspicions of bullying were probably right. Few bullies were the ones to flinch under a teacher's gaze. Shota purposefully made herself less threatening and also introduced herself. "Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa. You may call me whatever makes you feel the most comfortable with me," she said very gently but not sounding like she pitied them. "Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya, but you can just call me Deku like everyone else does," said Midoriya. "And I'm Hitoshi Shinso," Shinso said bluntly but was clearly nervous and uncomfortable. "So I'm guessing that you probably think that you are already in trouble even though the school year has yet to start, and that's why you had to come early today. Am I correct in my assumption?" Shota asked. They both nodded. "Well, seeing as you are both kids who I would guess were bullied by peers and teachers alike, that would be a reasonable response," she said with as gentle and non-threatening voice she could manage without sounding either patronizing, pitying, or like she thought they were fragile little kids. Her tone seemed to have worked at least a little bit as they both relaxed somewhat. A moment later, Midoriya asked, "If we aren't in trouble, then why are we here so early?" Shota then asked a question that scared them at first, but after she gave her reasoning, they calmed down a bit. "Is it okay with you two if I lock the classroom door so we won't be interrupted?" At the terrified expressions on the kids' faces that seemed to be fearing the worst, she quickly explained herself, but being careful not to let her tone get harsh. "It's just that I don't want the other students to overhear this conversation because it's about something that, until necessary, Nezu and myself want to keep them unaware of, so when they do a training lesson together or something similar, it's an unexpected thing," she reassured. It must have worked because the kids stopped looking so terrified and started to have Cheshire grins, which Shota loved. The two were proud and rather excited that they had acquired information that the rest of the class wouldn't have. and that knowledge was about to increase. They seemed to be the type who loved having the most information possible to protect themselves, which for them was probably a habit developed a very long time ago. The two gave her the okay to lock the door, so she got up and did so. When she sat back down, she saw the brats looking at the student files open on her desk, noting in hushed whispers that they weren't surprised that the teachers had tried to make them look bad. They noticed her as soon as she sat down, but seeing her smile and having a bit of an approving look in her eyes, they continued for a few minutes until she very lightly tapped at the desk to get their attention. "So I do believe I owe you two an explanation as to why you are here so early," she started. "Is it P perhaps because we both have files TH that seem to contradict the norm of we would be the bullied kid, not the B bully?" Midoriya asked. "Actually, no. While I do wish to look into that more, that's not the reason you're here. The reason is that Nezu and I have made a compromise on what class you are in." Shota started and then quickly went on before the kids could get to in their own heads about what she had just said. "I started a class that focuses on getting kids ready for doing underground hero work instead of limelight work a few years ago. Now I wanted to put you in that class because of the way you performed in the entrance exam and your quirk Shinso, which is most effective if the opponent doesn't know how the quirk activate, so they more easily fall into the trap of responding to your questions. However, I believe that the two of you would benefit from having me do your tactics and analysis instruction and possibly some of your physical training as well, since we all fight without the use of a combat-based quirk. Or to be more blunt, we all fight quirkless. So the compromise was that you would be in class 1 for almost every lesson, but if I'm the one teaching the underground class or there is a skill that I believe you should learn over what we are doing in class that day, then you will join underground class for the lesson or day depending on which works better for the time." She finished rambling, not giving the kids time to ask questions or make comments. She then realized that they probably had plenty of questions about what she had just said, so she let them ask them. "So what class will it say we are enrolled in on things like IDs?" Shinso asked. "It should say class 1 on it since most people don't know the underground class exists." "And your main class is 1A, Shota replied. "Well, we have to get to school early or stay late for this?" Midoriya asked. "It should be rather uncommon for you to be arriving early for this, however I may have you stay late if it's not a problem for you and your family, so I can give you two some extra training, since as people who fight quirkless we need to be faster, stronger and more resourceful than those who are fighting quirked. We don't have a quirk to fall back on and we need to be more vigilant and keep up with training. It is also best to have as many tools under your belt or around your neck as you possibly can," she said. As she said that last part, both of their eyes lit up as their gaze fell to the capture scarf around her neck, seeming to pick up on the fact that she had just offered to train them in using her capture weapon. "We should be able to get our guardians to let us do that. Also, we would be honored to do training with you," Shinso said excitedly. Shota noticed that the tension and some of the nerves had dissipated from both of them as they had talked. "All right, then I do believe that settles that. Do you have any other questions?" Shota said. "I don't think so." They both responded. "Well, then I only have two things left to say. The first is welcome to UA, the alma mater of some of the country's best known and performing heroes. The second is that you shouldn't be alarmed when I sound much harsher during regular classes," Shota told them. Shota thought that she was glad that letting them see the softer side of her first allowed them to trust her more, and hopefully it would also allow her to continue to get closer to them. She wondered if they had gone through similar experiences as she had in junior high. She spoke to them again. "Now go ahead and find your seats. The temporary seating chart is drawn up on the blackboard. We see how this works today, and when there is inevitably an issue with it, I shift it around until I find a good balance." Standing up to unlock the classroom door. Once she did, she went back to her desk, put away her files and notes, and pulled her sleeping bag out from under the desk, laid it out behind the podium and pressed against the wall where she was unlikely to be noticed, and closed her eyes, leaving one open just enough to look completely closed, but she could still see the whole classroom. After a little bit, the rest of the students began to arrive. The first student to arrive was Tenya, which was relatively unsurprising knowing his brother, always early those days. Although Tensei was even more punctual than most of them. He didn't notice the two in the back of the classroom at first, even though they had stopped being nearly so nervous. Shota takes a mental note that the two noticed Ada immediately and put their guards back up. While Shota was glad that the two had chosen to trust her to not harm them, it seemed that their trust was not so easily placed in their peers, which probably meant that their peers were harsher on them than teachers. She also made a mental note that most of her students would probably need situational and spatial awareness lessons. Eventually, Ida noticed the two in the back of the room and startled a bit, having previously believed that he was alone in the room since he had yet to notice her either. Although that was mostly expected, there had been very few students who had ever noticed her before she had made herself known in the past. The next few students who arrived were the rest of the students she had expected to be early to class: Momo Yaoyorozu, Shoto Todoroki, and Koji Koda. As they walked in, they quickly and quietly moved to their seats. Shota hoped that these kids were the ones who were early most days because they seemed to be the quiet kids. As they got closer to the start of the day, most of the kids arrived at a reasonable time before the bell. Eventually, they were about 1 minute to the bell and all but one student was present, Katsuki Bakugo. As she thought the name as if summoned, the last student appeared in the doorway and immediately started shouting, "Oi, all you extras, better remember that you are so far below me that you are no more than grains of sand under my feet." He then sat down, putting his feet up on the desk and popping a few small explosions. What a lovely way to enter a classroom. She noticed Izuku flinched hard in the back of the room, seemingly out of fear, as if he was afraid of the explosions. She then stood up from the floor and unzipped her sleeping bag and walked over to Bakugo, who was now being scolded by Ida for putting his feet on the desk, and Bakugo responding by insulting him and popping slightly louder explosions. Shota walked up to them and in a much harsher tone than she had used earlier this morning addressed Bakugo. "Katsuki Bakugo, you cannot use your quirk in the classroom without authorization or as a form of intimidation. This first time you get reprimanded and a warning not to do it again. The next time you do it, you get detention," she said. "Huh, you dare to have the nerve to tell me what to do, you old hack. I can use my God-given gift however I damn well please. Also, if they're intimidated by me, then they can cower before me as they should, like everyone did in junior high." They all knew their fucking place, Bakugo shouted. Shota then remembered the way that Izuku had introduced himself that morning and how he had flinched at Bakugo's explosion. Well, she would have to see how they interacted in a few minutes when they did the quirk assessment, and that would either confirm or disprove that they had known each other in junior high. "Bakugo, I can and will give you detention for quirk usage in the classroom without authorization. Don't test me," she said in a very serious tone. She didn't give him a chance to respond and walked over to the back corner of the classroom to talk to Shinso and Midori. She told them what they were going to do and told them to go get changed before she let the rest of them go. As the pair left the classroom to get changed, she went up to the podium and introduced herself. She also noted that none of the other students seemed to notice the pair leaving. She really would need to give them situational awareness and spatial awareness lessons. "Hello, Hellspawn, I will be your homeroom teacher for the next 3 years unless you are expelled, move to a different class, or something happens to me, and know that you being expelled is the most likely outcome. You will now go get changed into your P.E. uniform and meet me in the baseball field. Oh, and by the way, you can call me Aizawa-sensei." She left the classroom and went out to meet the two who were already waiting for her outside. She found them sitting on the dirt and signing to each other. Shota was honestly unsurprised that they both knew sign language. She walked over and crouched down where they could both see her, and also using sign asked if she could join them. Based on the shocked expressions on their faces, they didn't expect her to know sign language. Perhaps teachers never did in the past. They recovered from their shock quickly and accepted her into their little group. She made sure that Midoriya was okay since he had seemed to be rather shaken after Bakugo's explosion. He told her that Bakugo was never very nice to him in junior high and was the one who gave him the nickname Deku when they were young kids, confirming that the two had known each other in junior high and apparently much earlier as well. The three then chatted until the rest of the students came out to the field. Some looked shocked to see their teacher crouching on the ground and seemingly having a sign conversation with two of her students. Once Ida got over his shock, he immediately started chopping his hands, saying how improper the fact that a pair of students were bothering the teacher by chatting with her and how none of them had seen the two when they were changing. Shota told the two not to worry about what he was saying and to stand over with her if it made them more comfortable than standing with their peers. The pair nodded in acknowledgement. They all then stood up, the pair staying over with her instead of moving to join their peers. And Shota switched to verbal communication so that her other students could understand her. "Now, Ida, it is not improper for a teacher and a pair of students to have a conversation, even if it is a personal conversation, and you didn't see them because I sent them ahead of you all," Shota said bluntly. "Oh, of course. I just thought that it was inappropriate for a student to get so attached to a teacher, especially in this school when our teachers may lose their lives at any time. However, I can't remember ever seeing you before, so I suppose you could be a sidekick that never really gets any acknowledgement, where you focus on your teaching and don't do a lot of hero work," Ada responded, most likely not attempting to sound condescending but most definitely succeeding. Shota pursed her lips in irritation, then responded as calmly as she could. "I am an independent pro and you don't recognize me because I'm not a limelight hero. I'm an underground hero, so I more often deal with petty crimes or operations that take place at night. I do participate in some big daytime raids, but not particularly often. I don't want to be recognized. Also, I happen to have been good friends with Tensei since high school, so you have seen me before," she told him. He looked ashamed and a bit guilty about what he had said, now realizing how condescending he must have sounded to her. "I truly do apologize for my rudeness to you. And I'm even more sorry that I didn't recognize you, even though I'm certain I've talked to you before when you came to see Tensei. I do vaguely recognize you now that you said that I've seen you before," he said, bowing low. You're excused, and besides it's been quite a few years since I've been to see him. I usually see him while I'm working or we get coffee before his morning patrol starts if it's around when mine ends," she said. "Now I do believe that we should get started with the quirk assessment. I should hope that you remember regular physical assessments from junior high." She paused to look to her students for an answer and they all nodded in agreement. She then continued, "Well, this is like that, but this time you can use your quirk. Bakugo, go stand in that square over there and throw this as far as you can using your quirk," she told them. Bakugo thought that he was being called forward because this teacher had finally realized that he was on the level of a god, when in reality he was being called forward because he did score the highest on the practical entrance exam and his quirk would also make for a good example. So you finally recognize that my true level of power is significantly above the rest of these extras," he shouted arrogantly. Shota simply rolled her eyes and threw the ball at the angry Pomeranian. The boy caught the ball quite easily and then shifted himself into a better throwing stance, and as he threw the ball he shouted, "Shine." Shota rolled her eyes again and sighed lightly, wondering why this kid was yelling die when he threw a ball. After a few seconds she held up the receiver and the number displayed was 705.2 meters. She then had the rest of the students do the test, and the only person who topped Bakugo's distance was Uraraka, but that was because she used her quirk on the ball, which completely eliminated the effect of gravity, so it would just go on forever. So she inevitably had the highest score in that test. She had them do all the rest of the tests without issue. Because she had a quirkless kid and several kids whose quirks provided them no physical advantage, she chose not to threaten them with expulsion this year. With no surprise, it was Midoriya, Shinso, Hagakure, Gyro, and Kaminari at the bottom of the list because they had no advantage via their quirks. However, now was the part that Shota had not been excited about seeing go down. Bakugo hadn't been paying attention to the people around him and had not made note of who had been talking with her earlier. But now that the names of everyone in the class was put right in front of him, he was certainly going to notice Midoriya now. She had unfortunately been correct to assume that the hot-tempered boy would notice the name of his favorite target of bullying in junior high. "Boy, shitty Deku, you had the nerve to survive the entrance exam. Well, I guess this means I need to teach you a fucking lesson," Bakugo shouted, his tone clearly challenging him. Shota looked to Midoriya to see whether or not he wanted to do this. If he had wanted to do it, she probably would have let him while erasing Bakugo's quirk to even out the playing field. However, when Shota met his gaze, the boy signed a quick no, shaking his head. So Shota returned her gaze to Bakugo and told him that there was no need for him to teach Midoriya anything. As she said it, she stepped slightly in front of Midoriya, shielding him. The Pomeranian boy then charged towards them and produced small explosions and showed the beginning of a highly obvious right hook. Shota almost lazily threw her scarf at the boy and activated her quirk simultaneously, causing Bakugo to be unable to use his quirk and immobilizing the boy, making him unable to attack them in any way. Bakugo started shouting in indignation. "Boy, you old hag, this is none of your fucking business, so let me go and get out of my way so I can teach this useless quirkless Deku to know his place and get out of this school. Hell, I told him in junior high that if he took a swan dive off the fucking roof he might get a quirk in his next life. Haha." This made Shota absolutely furious, and in that moment she lost her cool and started to return the brat's barbs and added some probing questions where she could, because now seemed as good a time as any to get some answers out of him. So she started to match the volume of the brat's screaming. However, her tone was far more venomous and much less gloating. Shota was the one who struck first in this little spat, because if that's what this kid fucking wanted, then that's exactly what he would fucking get. Why the hell would you tell someone to commit suicide? What would you do if he had gone through with it? Would you have felt fucking vindicated? Or would you have just felt the guilt of being the person who caused him to tip over the fucking edge? If you did it at school, you would be caught on video and audio recording, and no amount of favoritism can get rid of the charge of fucking suicide baiting someone. Well, I knew that fucking Deku was too fucking cowardly to do it. The teachers wouldn't have done anything to harm my record anyway, so I was completely clear of anything I ever did. Besides, I knew he never could do it. Goodness knows he's afraid of everything and everyone. Besides, if he jumped, then he would be disappointing people even more than he already does, and he can't do that. If you ever hope to gain his trust, then stop hoping for something impossible. He never places his trust in anyone anymore. That was shattered so many years ago. So he trusts no one, least of all teachers. Why would he be so afraid of teachers who shattered that ability to trust others? What did they do to him to have him lose his trust in them completely? Why were the teachers not willing to dirty your record but were perfectly fine accusing him of things he never did? Why was not disappointing others more important than his own life? They always would turn a blind eye to what was happening to him, whether they saw us beating him up or when he very clearly came to school with more injuries than he left school the day before with. Hell, some of the teachers joined us in insulting him. Even better, a few teachers joined us in the physical bullying as well. They would constantly call him out or accuse him of cheating on a test because no way can the quirkless kid be a straight A student and no way can a quirkless kid have a perfectly clean record while someone who will clearly become a great hero surpasses all might not have a perfect record in grades. Why couldn't a quirkless kid have good grades? Why did he have to be falsely accused of things? Why can't he have a clean record? Just because you say so. Why did they think you were so special? Why would no teacher ever help him? Why did they turn a blind eye to everything? More importantly, why did they join you? What the fuck did the teachers do to him? I have no clue what they did to him behind closed doors. I hope that he will remember those experiences for the rest of his life and will never get comfortable with those around him. Why would you ever wish that on a person? That is completely fucked up. You should wish that a person who went through abuse would one day recover and be able to be comfortable and happy with their life. Why would you ever hope for the opposite? The only thing he deserves is mocking and pain. He is simply here on this earth to show those of us with quirks how superior we are to those who are unevolved. It's no surprise that everyone hates him, that's why he exists. Bakugo shouted in response with scornful laughter in his voice, and then Shota was done. She reined her fury back in and released her student from her capture weapon, having deactivated her quirk at some point. Bakugo being far too invested in yelling at her to take notice of that fact, Shota told the students to go get changed back into uniforms and head back to the classroom. She texted Nimari asking her to cover her class for the rest of the day while she cooled off after ending up in an argument with a student. She also told her that if Midoriya or Shinso comes back to class, tell them that they are excused for the rest of the day. Nimari accepted rather easily, not asking too many questions, and just left her to do her thing, knowing that she meant it when she said that she needed to cool down. Shota simply moved over to the small stand of nearby trees and hung her capture scarf from a sturdy branch that she was sure would support her weight. She sat on her scarf and then she used it to pull herself about 7 feet in the air and began to swing lightly. She sat for a while, just letting her thoughts wander, never following them, just letting them wander off and out of view. Finally, she noticed a thought that she should follow, so she did just that. It was a simple question but had quite the complicated answer. Why? Why would she do all of that for a student she barely knows? It really was a complex answer that even she had yet to piece together completely. Part of it was that she saw a bit of herself in the kid. And part of it was that just hearing the kid being so proud of suicide baiting someone and laughing afterwards caused her blood to boil. She was hopeful that she could bring some positive change to the boy's view of teachers, just like her teachers at UA had done for her when she was in high school. She knew that everyone was different, but she hoped that they would be similar enough for her to be able to gain at least a bit of his trust and perhaps restore some of his faith in teachers. It took a while for Shota to calm down enough for her to think much more, but when she did, she wondered if the way that she calmed herself down most of the time was symbolic of her tendency to run away from her own emotions, but eventually slip and fall and end up all too surrounded by them. It probably wasn't, but it was an interesting thought. She would need to revisit that later. Slowly, she became more aware of her surroundings. Apparently, she had been so far into her own thoughts that she had neglected to observe her surroundings at all. Eventually, as the world around her became clearer, she noticed a pair of boys sitting on a branch next to her, but about 1.5 meters away, and heard them chatting quietly. She turned her head to them and, recognizing them as Izuku and Shinso, she decided that she should talk to them and answer any questions about what had happened earlier. She made herself known to them, even though they certainly knew she was there since they seemed like they were giving her some space, and asked them if verbal communication was fine or if she should join them over there so they could see her sign. "Verbal communication works for us," said Midoriya. She was glad that he was able to keep his voice steady even though she saw that his hands were shaking a bit, most likely from the scare earlier in the day. Come to think of it, she had no idea how long had passed since the shouting match. Well, anyway, she should focus on the kids for now. "Alright then, would you like me to stay over here or would you like me to move somewhere else?" Shota asked. "You can stay there, Shota," Midoriya said. Then, realizing what he had said, quickly apologized. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you in any way. It's just that I didn't fully think through my form of address for you, so my stupid brain just used your first name. And I didn't use an honorific at all. I'm so sorry." Midoriya rushed out, stuttering a bit. "It's quite alright, kiddo. I did tell you too earlier that you can just call me whatever makes you feel most comfortable. That includes just using my first name." Shota responded gently. Oh, really? Are you sure?" Midoriya asked. "I am completely sure," Shota responded. "Okay then, Shota. By the way, why are you in a tree swinging and Midnight Sensei is in the classroom?" Midoriya asked, immediately followed by a question from Shinso. "Why are you using your scarf as a swing, Aizawa?" he asked. "What are you asking? Are you asking for the reason I'm up here? Or are you actually asking why I'm using my scarf as a swing?" Shota asked. "If you could answer both of those questions, that would be wonderful," Shinso said. "Well, to answer the question about both Nimari being in the classroom and why I'm in a tree, It's so I can calm down from that little shouting match however long ago that was. As to why I'm using my scarf as a swing is that it works very well to help me distress and think things over calmly. Shota said, "Oh, I guess that makes sense. But why did you get involved with that shouting match? It had nothing to do with you." Midoriya asked. "Well, I could see you were scared of him and that he wasn't going to let up on trying to fight you, so I originally stopped him from doing that, but then he made that comment about suicide baiting you and I was furious at him for that." Shota told him, "Oh, I guess that it really wasn't okay then. They were all wrong. My teachers, my peers, my mother," Midoriya said sadly. "If they agreed with Bakugo and thought you didn't deserve to live just because you're quirkless, then yes, they were wrong," Shota said gently. She then let a loop of her scarf fall down next to the kid who looked very troubled. The boy noticed it and pulled it a bit closer to himself before sitting on it and swinging lightly. The three then sat in comfortable silence for a while. Eventually she noticed that Shinso was examining the capture weapon that both Shota and Midoriya were sitting on. She turned to the boys and asked if they wanted to do a bit of practice with the scarf. "Can we?" they said in almost exact sync. "Of course we can. Let me get down from here and go get some of my extra capture scarves," she said as Midoriya hopped out of the loop of scarf that he was sitting in, allowing her to get down. She then used her scarf to lower herself to the ground and started to head over to the UA building. As she walked, she wondered what time it was and whether or not she would end up keeping the two students late after school and whether or not their parents would be concerned about them. Then she thought about what Midoriya had said, which included his mother as someone who was wrong and had agreed with Bakugo. She began to wonder if Midoriya's home life was safe and he was properly provided for. She would ask him about it later. She arrived in her office to grab the extra capture weapons from in her desk drawer. She then walked back out to the pair of boys that were waiting for her to come back. Once she got back to them, they jumped down from the tree with little to no effort. She smiled at them as they ran towards her with excitement. When they stopped in front of her and looked at what she held in her hands and around her arms, she unwound the capture weapons from around her arm and deposited one on each boy's shoulders and watched with a bemused expression. "How do we get this settled around our shoulders like you have yours?" Shinso asked with a frustrated expression on his face. It was rather amusing to watch them struggle with the scarves, but she figured that she should probably show them how to do it. She told them to watch her as she quickly unwound her scarf from around her neck and dropped it into a heap onto the ground, exposing the pair of yellow goggles hanging around her neck. Izu seemed to notice those and seemed a bit surprised, almost as if he recognized them. The pair watched intently as she picked up the scarf and began to wind it around her neck. But she did it much slower than she normally would, so the two could see quite easily how she wound it. The two then pulled their failed attempts of trying to settle the scarf around their shoulders off and slowly started to put them on correctly. Shota was helping the pair get used to moving around the same way they normally would with the scarf on. This was going rather well, and for the most part they were self-sufficient for this and had asked that for the most part that she would just watch them practice. So currently she was sitting in a loop of her capture scarf that she had hung from the tree. It was interesting to watch because they already moved across thin branches and climbed things with such nonchalance and confidence that the scarves didn't really inhibit their movements, but she could see that once they learned to use the scarf to swing across things and in general use it to increase their overall mobility, they would be impressively mobile and agile where their opponents might not be, such as rooftops or areas like alleys. Eventually, the two boys were exhausted from all the intense exercise they had been doing today. "Midoriya, Shinso, you guys should be done for the day," Shota called out. "All right, Shota, we are heading over to you now," Midoriya called out in response. Shota was well aware that most parents would be very worried about their kids if they were supposed to have gotten home several hours ago but still had yet to return. The boys had walked over to her at this point and stood before her with proud smiles on their faces. Shota smiled back and told them they should probably head home now since it would be dark soon, and the two agreed with her and started to unwind the scarves from around their necks, but Shota stopped them and told them to keep them until she could get them their own version made that would fit them better. The duo then wound the scarves back around their necks, thanked her, and then left. Shota walked back over to the UA building to go over the notes that she was sure that Nimiri had left for her on her desk, and she would also use those notes to help redo the seating chart to cause less fights between students who would often have disagreements, and those who needed someone near them to regulate them. She would do that as well. When she walked past the support classroom, however, she paused and thought about whether or not Majima would still be in there. She decided to knock and see who was in there. When she did, she was happy to hear his voice through the door telling her to come in. When he saw her in his classroom, he got curious. She almost never came into the support classroom because she almost never needed them. She was rather good at keeping her scarf and staff intact, so she rarely needed a new one, and she had new knives delivered to her office on a set schedule, so that was very, very rarely why she was here. So all in all, he was curious. "Hey Majima, is it possible that I could send 2 of my students to you for you to fit them for capture weapons?" Shota inquired. "Of course it is, but why do you want that? You rarely take on a personal student, let alone 2. and you're teaching them how to use your scarf. Who are these kids? Majima asked incredulously. Izuku Midoriya and Hitoshi Shinso. And before you ask, one has a brainwashing quirk and one is quirkless, Shota said bluntly. Majima was stunned and speechless. First off, Shota had taken very few personal students in all her time as a teacher, and now she had taken on 2 in 1 year at the same time, and she was teaching them how to use her scarf, which she had never done before. He was completely shocked and was also rather excited to meet these kids in the near future. Well, I can measure them and make the scarves for them. I can also make any other support gear that they may need. I will be their personal support worker until they graduate and beyond graduation as well if they want me to be, Majima told her. Actually, while Midoriya is in here, measure him for a staff, would you? And asked both what they would think about having throwing knives as part of their toolkit. Shota told him. All right, that's fine with me, Majima said. Thank you then. I should probably head to my classroom to read my notes from Nimiri, she said. All right then, see you around, and send those kids when you can, Majima said to her as she walked toward the door. Shota returned to the Wana classroom and went immediately to her desk. She saw a small neat stack of papers on her desk with Nimiri's handwriting clearly on them. These must be the notes that she had made about the behavior of the class throughout the rest of the day. She sat down in her chair and started to go over the notes. As she got to the part about the relations between students, she pulled out a piece of blank paper to redo the seating chart on. According to Nimiri, Kirishima should be kept close to Bakugo because he was the only one who could withstand Bakugo's constant cursing and insults and also caused him to calm down a little. But that Ada should be kept away from Bakugo, and that would reduce the amount of arguments between the two. No surprise there. She had expected that Bakugo would be a little demon and not one to make friends easily. From what she was reading, there weren't very many other problems with people having issues with other classmates, so she didn't seem to have problems with putting them with each other to try and find a balance of people who were compatible with people around them and also find a group who could tolerate Bakugo. All in all, the day had gone well and very few conflicts had occurred other than a bit of arguing between Ada and Bakugo. So she decided that she should probably head home for the day and get some rest since she had to do actual classes tomorrow. She didn't have patrol tonight. And the beginning of the school year was a shift in her patrol schedule to accommodate for the extra sleep she would need because of teaching. The next morning she arrived at the classroom about an hour before the start of class and put the new seating chart up on the chalkboard. She then sat at her desk and went through the notes she had made on her students' quirks during the quirk assessment yesterday and started to add them to her overall student notes. Most students had a relatively good grasp on their quirks, but some needed to work on their application of the quirk a bit more, and some needed to work on expanding their limits. She was so caught up in her musing about her students and how best to help them that she almost didn't notice when Ida came through the door. Good morning, Ida, Shota said in greeting. Aizawa-sensei, good morning, Ida replied, chopping his hands in the air. Shota watched as he went over to his new seat and sat down to wait for class to start in 20-ish minutes. Shota went back to going over quirk analysis notes she had taken on her students. The rest of the students started to fill in the classroom until about 10 minutes before class started. Bakugo came into the room mostly quietly, but he did slam the door behind him. She was a little concerned about the pair of students who had yet to arrive, mostly because of her suspicions of familial abuse, and they had gone home rather late the day prior. Right before she was going to stand up and go to her podium to start homeroom, the door opened and a pair of students rushed in and went up to her desk. Do you two need anything from me? Shota asked. Yuan, could we talk to you about something during homeroom? You, unless you're busy, then it's fine, Midoriya asked. The latter half of his question sped up as if he thought he would offend her. His stutter that had faded for the most part yesterday afternoon had returned to his voice. Of course you can let me get class started and then we can go to my office for some privacy, Shota said to them. She then stood up from her desk and stepped over to the podium to get the students started on a self-study period, and then brought the pair of students to her office, which she rarely used, so it was very well kept and also rather sparse. She went to her desk and turned on the lamp to provide a bit of light, and then moved a pair of chairs over to the desk and then sat down on the side edge of the desk since she had put the chair from behind her desk on their side of the table, motioned for the pair to sit down. She hesitated to immediately ask what was wrong in case she scared them enough to choose to not tell her. However, she didn't have to wait for too long since they had clearly made up their minds to tell her even though it scared them. Thank you for choosing to speak with us and not just brush us off for later. If you had, then we would probably have never told you, Shinso said. Of course I would talk with you. I trust that you aren't just trying to get attention by lying. You two don't seem the type, Shota responded. Well, you seem like the type who will at least attempt to help us and not just have us tell you that something's wrong and not try and do something about it, Shinso told her. You read me well. I'm not that kind of person. I hate seeing my Kai students in pain or extremely worried or upset. Shota stumbles over the word students and she almost said kid. Well, enough beating around the bush and formalities, then I think that we should tell you what we came here to tell you, Shinso tells her. UMI, I'll take I at F from H here, Toshi. Midoriya says his stutter worsened as he went. Alright, but if it ends up too much to handle then I'll take over, okay? Shinso tells Midoriya. Alright. Well, we have N not so G great home lives and it's getting K kind of unsafe for B both of us. But it's worse for Toshi B because they restrict his ability to use his quirk by making him unable to talk using a muzzle. Mine is mostly just P physical abuse and some M manipulative words and actions from M my mom. Midoriya started. Shota was shocked that they were still as emotionally stable as they seemed to be, but she also knew that they could have issues that ran much deeper than she could see. But we were hoping that if we had enough evidence of the abuse that it would be irrefutable even though I'm quirkless and Toshi has a villainous quirk. Midoriya practically spat out the word villainous using air quotes and a look of disdain probably directed at those who called it as such, clearly not believing that Hitoshi's quirk was villainous, that it would still get us removed from our homes and in reality into a system that will be extremely cruel to us but could end happily for us at some point, however unlikely that is. Actually, that's part of why we enrolled at UA, because we learned that we could potentially become wards of UA and T. That sounds better than the foster system, Midoriya said, seeming to be done. Shota was shocked that they had never told anyone about this that would do something, and that they knew enough that they had already done evidence collection and had known about the chances of their case being passed. They even knew that if their case did somehow pass, the chances they were to find a good home in the foster system were very low. The most surprising thing was that they knew of the UA ward system, which most of the public didn't know about. Okay, then I would assume you want help getting out of your current situation, yes? Shota inquired. If that's something you can do, then yes, Shinso said. I can only really do anything about it if we tell Nezu, but you may feel uncomfortable doing that. Shota told them. I think that would be fine. He might have fun destroying our school district since they were particularly awful, Shinso told her. Yes, he probably will. He's been somewhat bored recently. Shota mused, then remembered the not-so-nice implications that Nezu being bored always brought for her and shivered a bit. Well, I already have a meeting with him during lunch to share my student notes so that he can enter them into the student database system, which is helpful to the other teachers. However, I do think that he will be open to hearing you out and creating a plan to help you and possibly get you into a better home. We most definitely will not put you into the foster system. That would probably end poorly for you. Also, Nezu has a lack of trust in humans, so he won't subject you to their terrible whims. Most of the teachers here have an emergency foster license, so you could stay with one of us until we figure out where to put you, Shota told them. Is it possible that we could stay with you? Midoriya asked, not meeting Shota's eyes. It is, but let's talk to Nezu before we start figuring out where you would stay. Alright, Shota told them. Alright, Shinso said. Should we head back to class now, Shota? Midoriya asked. Only if you want to. We can stay here until the end of homeroom since it's just self-study and they are just socializing now since they don't exactly have anything to study right now. However, we will have to go back when actual classes start, Shota told them. But stay in the classroom. When you get dismissed for lunch, we will head to Nezu's office so we can talk to him and he will feed us. Don't worry about that, Shota said. Alright, thank you so much for choosing to help us. We had worried for a bit that you would turn out like everyone else who never helped or didn't notice, Shinso said with obvious sincerity. Of course, I don't want more kids going through what I did because of my quirk, which led to parental abuse, bullying from peers, and the teachers always made me the problem, Shota said, then continued on with some background before tentatively asking a question. However, when I call you two problem children, it's at least from me an endearing thing. I call children who cause problems and make me angry by name to convey my displeasure. But kids who I find are danger magnets and I personally find endearing, problem children. If that is something you don't want me to call you, I won't, but if you don't mind, then I want to give both of you that nickname. I will call you by name sometimes though. That's fine with me, Shota. Me as well. Alrighty then, problem children, we should probably start heading back to class. The bell will ring in a few minutes, Shota told them. They all stood up and headed for the door and then walked to the classroom in comfortable silence. Shota knew that they had taken a huge risk choosing to trust her at all, and she also knew that they still didn't trust her fully, but she hoped that would change. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is trust. They got back to the classroom and were immediately welcomed by Bakugo shouting at someone. Oi, Four Eyes, mind your own fucking business. No one fucking asked your opinion, Bakugo yelled. I'm very sorry that you are offended. However, you do need to respect your classmates and the rules, Ida said while chopping his hands in the air. Did your old school shove a stick up your ass or were you born with it? Bakugo yelled at Ida. Ida looked completely shocked by the question. Shota sighed as she walked into the classroom and moved over to get the pair to stop arguing with each other. Alright, what happened to start this argument? Shota asked. Bakugo-kun was refusing to call the other students by their actual names and would only call them by nicknames, Ada said to her. Were the other students okay with this? Shota asked. I am unsure of that. However, Bakugo-kun was using rather insulting nicknames, such as calling Kirishima-kun shitty hair, Ada said. Shota sighed and told him that if the person had no problem with the nickname, then he should just leave it be. And even if they didn't like it, then it wasn't his problem to fix, it was theirs. Of course, sensei. I will now return to my seat, Ada said, and then went to sit down. First period will start soon, so get ready to at least pretend to be respectful to the teacher, Shota said tiredly, then went and sat at her desk. Shota went to type up an email to Nezu about having the two students join them for lunch, but as she was about to start writing it, Hazashi slammed the door open and yelled a greeting to the students, startling everyone, especially the two in the back and herself. For fuck's sake, Mike, could you not yell at people every single time you enter a room? Shota asked of him tiredly yet sharply, as if she had said this to him so many times before. Oh yes, very sorry Shota, I didn't mean to startle you, Mike replied. Whatever, it's not like anything about it has changed in years anyway. Now get to teaching before I kick you out of my classroom, Shota told him while rolling her eyes. Mike got class started and Shota went back to writing the email to Nezu. Once she finished that, she grabbed her notes from her desk drawer to work on those, partly for Nezu and partly to add anything that may help her guide her students in the right direction. She passed both Mike's English class and Ectoplasm's math class like this, and then they were released for lunch. Shota watched as most of the students got up and headed out of the classroom to go to the cafeteria or wherever they were going to eat their lunch. Only 2 students stayed in the classroom. Shota rose to her feet and beckoned for the pair to follow her to Nezu's office. While they were walking, Shota asked how their classes were so far. They answered that they were fun and didn't say much else, clearly nervous about meeting with Nezu. Eventually they got to Nezu's office and Shota knocked on the door asking for permission to enter. She received a comment from Nezu and opened the door for the kids. Nezu waved them in and then asked a question. Do you mind if Detective Tsukachi joins us? It will make it easier to get you out of your current living situation if he hears all of this, since he is working with the police. Shota looked over to the kids who were having a quick conversation about it in sign language. They decided that it would be fine to have Tsukachi hear what they had to say. Shota asked if they were ready to do this and they nodded. Who is telling the story this time? I would assume that Shinso will do it this time, since Midoriya seems like his stutter is much worse than it was this morning, Shota asked. Yes, I will tell the story for Nezu and Tsukachi so as to not put too much strain on Nezu, Shinso said. Shinso told both Nezu and Tsukachi about both the abuse and the bullying from both peers and teachers. Nezu was shocked to hear the extent of both and told them that they would try and get them out of their homes as soon as possible. Nezu then told them that they could probably get them out before the end of the day due to him being able to get around a lot of red tape, but they still would just be wards of UA not having a permanent home for now. So he asked a question. If we get you out of your homes today, you would probably need to stay with one of our teachers or other faculty members, unless you already have a plan on where to stay for now. All of our teaching staff and faculty members have both emergency and permanent foster licenses, so you could stay with one of us if you wish, Nezu told them. The pair turned to each other, nodded, then turned to look at Shota. She rolled her eyes and said, Yes, you can stay with me for now, problem children. Thanks, Shota, Midoriya said to her. Shota, Nezu questioned, surprised that she was letting a student call her by first name. Of course, Izuku, it's no problem. And yes, Nezu, I let them call me whatever they feel more comfortable with, which does include my given name, Shota said, first speaking to Izuku then Nezu. Ah, Shota, you can just call me Izu if you want, it will probably be easier to remember anyway, Izuku said. All right then, Izu, I'll do that, Shota said. Well, I do believe that we are done with that matter, yes, Nezu asked. Yes, we have no more to tell you, Shinso said. Okay, then I would like to chat with Eraser about her notes on her students, Nezu said. Shota sighed and went over her notes with Nezu, who put them in the system for all the other teachers. After they finished going over the notes, they all finished their lunch and headed back to the classroom. Nezu also gave Shota a pile of papers for her to go through and look over stuff for heroics classes. Shota went and sat at her desk and picked up a book off her desk. Very shortly after the students started returning to class and getting seated, Shota knew that this next class would be a favorite of theirs. They were about to have their first foundational heroics class. As the rest of the students got seated and ready for their next class, Shota waited for the foundational heroics teacher to make his entrance. The door suddenly opened violently for the second time that day. All Might made his excessively dramatic entrance and shouted what was effectively his catchphrase, "Now, I am here." Even though Shota was expecting the shouting, it still startled her. She sighed and stood up to introduce the class to her now extremely excited students. This will be your first foundational heroics class. You will be taught by either myself or All Might for the most part. Some other teachers will join us to work on their particular specialty. So this will probably be your most diverse class because of the amount of teachers you will have in this class, Shota told them. They looked ecstatic to get started, and Shota moved out of the way for Yagi to begin teaching. Alright kids and future heroes, let's get started. Usually you would have your hero costumes by now, but the support crew is just a bit behind, so we don't have them quite yet, but you will get them as soon as we can get them to you, All Might told them. Shota sat back down at her desk, listened as Yagi described the system of the round-robin sparring that would take place that day, then realized that it was certain that Izu and Bakugo would end up fighting, which she assumed wouldn't end well. She made the decision to drop something to get his attention and then make sure that the kid was okay with this, and if he wasn't, then she would get Yagi to do something about it. She then casually knocked her stack of papers that Nezu had given her earlier along with a bunch of her own normal paperwork off her desk and moved to pick them up. Izu noticed immediately, and to Shota's surprise he got up and moved to the front of the classroom to help her. He drew attention to himself by calling out to her, "Shota, are you okay? Let me help you pick those up." Shota looked up surprised. "Izu, there's no need to help me. I'm just a bit clumsy, that's all." Shota told him. "I'll help you anyway, Shota. It's what a future hero should do," Izu told her. Shota sighed and gave in and let him help her collect the paperwork. While they were picking it up, she noticed a pair of papers that looked out of place in a pile of mostly student forms and documents, a pair of adoption papers. It startled her for a moment. She just stared at them for a second, but then she realized why they were there, and she quickly put them on the bottom of her stack and quietly asked the question she had knocked a pile of papers over for. "Hey Izu, with the round-robin system of the sparring matches, it's guaranteed that you will have to spar with Bakugo. Is that something you are comfortable with? That depends on whether or not I can use my scarf. If not, then no, I don't think I can fight him unless I get a staff, but with it then I should be okay. If I can use both my scarf and a staff, that would be wonderful," Izu told her. "I do believe that both of those can be arranged. I will also allow Shinso to use his scarf, but no one else has support items yet. However, it levels the playing field for you and Shinso," Shota told him as he passed her the last of the papers. "Alright, then I'll let Toshi know that he can use his scarf for sparring," Izu told her, then stood up and walked back over to his desk. She watched him lightly tap Shinso's desk to get his attention, and then using sign language he told him what Shota had said. Eventually Yagi had finished making the initial pairings and then told them all to go get changed. Yagi left with them, not noticing the pair of students that had stayed behind in the classroom. Shota got up from her desk and walked over to her problem children. "Are you two ready to do this?" Shota asked them. "I think so, but where do I get my staff, Shota?" Izu asked. "I don't have yours yet, but I will just have you use mine for today, and I will take both of you to Powerloader this afternoon to get you both throwing knives and your actual scarves that will be your size instead of mine. We will also have him do measurements so we can have him start making your costumes, since you were both dismissed early yesterday, which is when you would have given them your costume design ideas. Also, Izu will get his staff," Shota told the pair. "Alright then, should we get going to meet up with the rest of the class then?" Izu asked her. "We should. You both need to change though, and while you do that I will go grab my staff for Izu," Shota said, standing back up. The pair stood up with her and they went off to the locker rooms. Shota went to her office to grab her staff for Izu to use. When she got to ground beta, she watched chaos unfold, only sighing tiredly and not stepping in and seeing how Yagi handled the situation. "Hey Midoriya-kun, why did you call Sensei by her first name earlier? Isn't that rude to her and to her title as our sensei?" Uraraka asked. "It in fact is Uraraka-chan. You should not have done that, Midoriya-kun. It was highly disrespectful to our sensei. You should apologize to her for your transgression on proper etiquette," Ida told both of them. Shota realized why Yagi wasn't stepping in, because it was about her. Shota sighed again and then walked over to the group of students. She announced her presence by tossing the staff to Izu. "Alright, you bunch of hellspawn, leave the problem child alone. He did nothing wrong," Shota told them. "But sensei, he was very disrespectful to you earlier. Also, why did you give him a staff? Isn't it an unfair advantage for him to have support items?" Ida asked her. "It actually levels the playing field for him and Shinso, who is also being allowed to use a support item," Shota told him. "Why does it level the playing field? Doesn't it give them more access to resources that we don't get?" Ida asked. "Actually, Ida, that is a wonderful question, and actually I'm going to give that answer to the whole class before we get started," Shota told him, and then walked over to Yagi to get the class's attention. "Hey Yagi, can I talk to the class really quickly before they get started?" Shota asked him. "Yeah, of course, Aizawa," Yagi told her, then called for the class's attention. "Alright class, this was a good question brought to my attention by one of your classmates about the fairness of letting a pair of students use support items while the rest of you can't." Shota then asked for Ada to restate his question from earlier. "I simply asked, why does it level the playing field? Doesn't it give them more access to resources that we don't get? After Sensei told me that the support items would level the playing field for them," Ada said. "Now this may seem unfair on the surface, however it is actually quite fair. The pair that will have access to support gear is Izuku and Shinso. One of them is quirkless and one of them has a mental-only quirk that becomes useless once his opponent knows how it works, so he mostly fights hand-to-hand. Now the rest of you have quirks that either can hide you or assist you in combat, and they don't. Does having access to support gear seem so unfair to you now?" Shota gave them the reasoning behind them having the gear and then posed the question of fairness. She noticed that the students were whispering among themselves about what she had just said. No student opposed her decision, not even Bakugo. Shota then moved off the platform and let Yagi get the kids started. Shota was rather interested to see how her students utilized their quirks in their fighting style. She took up a position that would allow her to see the sparring matches clearly, but they wouldn't see her if they didn't look for her. The pairings were relatively straightforward all the way through. She worked on writing her notes on fighting style and how she could help improve their skills. However, the sparring match that she had been anxious about was about to start. Bakugo and Izu moved to stand across from each other on the street, and Izu flicked the staff open and set his stance. Bakugo for his part stepped into a stance that very clearly telegraphed his first move. He also left himself rather open to a counterattack and was smirking as if he didn't think that he would need to take this fight seriously. Start, All Might called. The first move was made by Bakugo, who charged forward and moved his right fist behind him for a right hook. Izu for his part stood his ground until his opponent started to swing his fist forward, and then he pushed off the ground and brought his staff around to smack Bakugo hard on the shoulder while also using the force of impact to redirect his momentum off to the side, landing about a meter away from his opponent. Bakugo stumbled a bit from the impact and then started popping explosions. Izu stood and watched his opponent, who was very clearly angry and indignant. Bakugo hadn't expected that Izu would even get a single blow in. At this rate, Izu would get him to a state of no longer safe to continue rather quickly. Bakugo then began to use his quirk. His control was impressive, however he only seemed to be using it for attacking, not distraction, defense, or increased mobility. Izu clearly noticed this and began to use it to his advantage. When Bakugo attacked him, he left himself open to attack because he didn't have a guard up. Suddenly, gray fabric bound Bakugo, making him unable to continue fighting, and he had a long metal staff hovering a short distance from his stomach. Bakugo was in shock that the weak kid who he had bullied for years was now the one in a position to hurt him. He just blinked for a minute, then started yelling nonsense, and Izuku turned to All Might and simply asked if this was the end of the match. All Might was shocked to see how the kid had fought a partner that was both quirked and that he was much smaller than. Izu wins the sparring match. Go ahead and release him, Shota called out, startling the kids who had forgotten she was there. All right, Shota, mind if I join you up there to watch until my next match? Izu called up to her. Yeah, why not Shinso too? She called down. Izu released Bakugo from his scarf, snapping his staff shut as he did, and grabbed Shinso and jumped up to meet her in her alcove. The pair settled down to observe the next matches. The next few matches were not particularly interesting. However, Shota got to see Izu's analysis skills for the first time, and they were impressive. He was almost as good as Shota herself was, and she had practiced longer than this kid had been alive. She asked him to help her analyze the students' fighting styles for both herself and Nezu to use in planning. Eventually, it was Izu's turn again. Shinso had gone a few people earlier and won his match, but he was against Hagakure, so that wasn't too surprising. The sparring matches went on until the only ones who had not yet sparred were Izu and Shinso. She was actually rather excited to observe because they both had very similar fighting styles. And with how they had worked together in the entrance exam, she would guess that they had done some training together. They jumped down from their perch with her and got ready to spar. Hey Izu, I won't use my quirk at all during this match, so can you not use your staff? And neither of us will use a scarf, Shinso asked the boy opposite him. Alright, then I'll agree to that, Izu told him. They both unwound the scarves from their necks and tossed them off to the side, and Izu tossed his staff on top of his scarf. They then returned to a stance that told All Might that they were ready. 3, 2, 1, begin, All Might called out. The pair didn't move immediately, just standing there watching for any telegraphing of their first move, which neither of them was doing. Eventually, All Might got tired of waiting and told them that Izu would make the first move. They both sighed, and then Izu jumped forward towards the other boy. Shinso dodged the kick that was aimed at him in a way that made you think that there was no effort in the action. Izu then twisted around and lashed out with his hands towards the back of the other boy's neck. Shinso then moved forward and pulled Izu's leg along with him, causing Izu to roll onto the asphalt. Shinso spun around to face him and went to pin him to the ground. Izu was, however, expecting this move and pushed his feet off the street and flipped over himself to avoid getting pinned. Shinso jumped back as Izu jumped up and forward while bringing his hands up towards the other boy. This back and forth went on for quite a while, and eventually All Might started to get impatient again and went to stop the match. Suddenly, Izu pushed off the ground extremely hard and ended up above both of their heads, and Shinso immediately looked up to track the boy. The boy dropped soundlessly behind him and lashed out and hit the back of his neck with the edge of his hand, therefore ending the match by knocking his opponent unconscious. All Might looked startled when the lavender-haired boy started to slump forward, but was caught rather quickly by the green. Shota hopped down from her observation spot and walked over to the pair of students. All Might will take the rest of this class on his own, and I will take the unconscious student to Recovery Girl, Shota said, giving Yagi no room for argument. She then walked up to the pair and quietly asked if it would be okay if she carried Shinso, and Izu nodded. She collected Shinso in her arms and asked if the other boy was ready. He nodded and they both set off to the nurse, Izu grabbing both of their capture scarves and his staff on the way. That was a rather impressive fight you two had, Shota told the kid who was currently winding his scarf back around his neck. Was it? Toshi usually lasts longer if he doesn't beat me, Izu told her. Really, because that was a rather long match. Longer than any other pair. Long enough for you to begin to make All Might impatient, Shota told the kid. Before he could answer, the boy in her arms had begun to stir. Aizawa, why are you carrying me? Shinso asked, words slurred ever so slightly. You were knocked unconscious at the end of your match, so you couldn't exactly walk to the nurse. So I'm carrying you there, Shota said to the boy. Well, I'm awake now, so put me down. I promise I can walk, Shinso said to her while starting to wriggle out of her arms. Sorry kiddo, no can do. You may be awake, however you are likely to pass out again, and I can't let that happen, so here you stay, Shota told him gently. Fine. I'll stop moving around since I don't particularly want to be dropped, Shinso said in a resigned voice. I'm good, because I don't particularly want to drop you either, Shota said. They continued on in silence until they reached the door to the nurse's office. Shota asked Izu to knock since her hands were a bit occupied with the kid. Shio answered the door with a sigh and said, What did you do to your students this time, Shota? I did nothing this time. The sparring was Yaga's idea and it wasn't my class to teach today, she told the old nurse, putting emphasis on the I. I'm not all that surprised that he did that without having taught them anything about safety or control, Shio said with a sigh. Well, put the one in your arms on a bed and have the other sit with him, Shio told her. Shota obliged, setting Shinso down and watching Izu sit on the edge of the bed next to him. Shota went and grabbed a chair from along the wall and put it on the side of the bed that faced the door, making sure that she would see whoever walked in. Shio walked over to the pair and asked if anything hurt. They immediately told her no, but Shota intervened and gave her a list of the injuries that she had noticed during the sparring match. So other than one of you getting knocked out, you only have some scrapes? Shio inquired from them. The pair nodded, not looking her in the eyes. Well, those can be easily fixed as long as you have the energy for it, she told them. She then kissed their foreheads to heal them, then told Shinso to stay here to get some rest, but cleared Izu to return to class, but allowed him to stay until the end of the day since it was only about 30 minutes away. Izu unsurprisingly chose to stay with Shinso, and Shota was going to stay with her students anyway. Shio smiled at them and left the office. Hey Shinso, do you think that you will be good to head to Powerloader after the bell rings to do measurements and such? Shota asked. I think so, he said. Well, then I should let him know that you two are coming to him once the bell rings, Shota said as she realized that she had never told Majima that they were coming today. PFFD, you forgot to let him know even though we talked about it this morning, Izu said while giggling. Don't make fun of me, Shota said, exasperated. Fine, I'll stop, Izu said, still laughing lightly. Shota sighed and texted Majima to tell him that they were going to head to the support classroom after the bell rang. Izu and Shinso were chatting quietly on the bed, and Shota was sitting in the chair next to the bed just listening. After a bit, the bell rang to dismiss the students, and Chiyo returned to her office and let Shinso know that he was good to leave now. They all got up and thanked her. Thank you for healing us, recovery girl, Shinso said for both of them. Of course, dear, she told them. Yes, thanks for healing my brats, Shota told her. Of course, now don't get them too hurt the first time you do training with them, alright, Chiyo told her. I'll try not to, Shota told her. The trio then proceeded to head towards the support classroom. Hey Shota, did you ever get a response from Powerloader Sensei? Izu asked her. Yeah, I did. He said that he was excited to meet my new personal students, she told him. Why would he be so excited? Shinso asked. Because I very rarely take personal students at all, let alone two in the same year and at the same time. Also, he is rather shocked that I'm teaching anyone how to use my scarf. That's not something I've ever done, Shota told Shinso. Oh, I guess that makes sense, Izu said. Does it though? Shota asked. It does. We are something that is extremely unusual, and he gets to work directly with us, so he can learn why we caught your attention, Izu told her. I guess I never thought about that, Shota mused. They had arrived at the support classroom by that point. Shota knocked on the door to the classroom and waited for a response, thinking that if she didn't get one within 2 minutes, she would assume that Majima couldn't hear her knock. She waited for a minute and a half before the door opened. She was kind of surprised that he had heard her knock, but perhaps he had been waiting for them. Hello Aizawa, thanks for bringing the kids to me, Majima said. Of course, they do need their stuff after all, Shota told him as they started to walk in. Fair enough. Would I have still gotten to meet them if they didn't? Majima asked her. Probably, since they are still Hero Course students. Well, I guess that's true. By the way, I'm almost done with the rest of your class's hero costumes, so I should be done with them by tonight. I really am sorry for taking so long, but a bunch of the second and third years needed to adjust their costumes before training started, and they forgot that they can just have us do stuff like that over break. Majima told her. It's fine. Really, it was an interesting way to explain why a few kids have support gear and they don't. Shota let him know. Alright, then I'll get these two done tonight as well so you all can do the USJ stuff on Thursday, Majima said as he got his stuff ready for doing measurements. By the way, Shota, do you want me to work on anything for you while I'm doing stuff for your class? Majima asked her. No, I think that I have everything that I'll need for Thursday, Shota told him. Alright, then let's get started. Do you two know what you want your costumes to look like? Majima asked the pair, who were both standing a bit behind Shota awkwardly. I do, they both answered. Alright, why don't you both write out what you want so I can make them and so I know what measurements I need to get, Majima told them and passed them paper and writing utensils. They both sat down at the desks, work tables used by the support students, and got started, and Majima turned around to his desk and got back to work on the rest of Class 1A's costumes. Shota found a seat at one of the support students' workstations and started going over and started transferring her notes from earlier into her normal notes, and realizes that her students have pretty diverse fighting styles, which could be either really interesting to teach or a bit of a nightmare. She then stood up from the desk and went to see what her students had given to the support group for their first draft costumes. All in all, they were pretty good and were designed to help enhance their quirks. The most complex one for them was probably Hagakir's, which was supposed to go invisible with her. Got any questions about your students' costumes, Shota? Majima asked when he noticed her looking over his shoulder. Yeah, how did you get Hagakir's costume to go invisible with her but be visible when she wants it to? Shota asked. Do you know Muriel? Majima asked. No, well, he has a quirk that lets him phase through anything. However, his clothes wouldn't go with him, so we ended up analyzing his DNA and we then used that to make fabric that would just go with him. I did the same for her, but adjusted it just enough that she could change the visibility at will, the same way she can make herself visible when she wants to be, Majima told her. That's interesting, Shota told him. Majima smiled at her and then said, I do believe that your kids are done with their writing. He was right, and they gave him the papers and writing utensils. Shota went back to the desk she had been sitting at before and finished up transferring notes while Majima did what he needed to do for the kit. It took almost an hour for him to finish up, and he let her know that the class's costumes would be ready in the morning. Shota thanked him for his time and told the kids to follow her. Where are we going now, Aizawa? Shinso asked her. Home. Or well, to my apartment at least. A home has people you care about and people who care about you, so I'm not sure if I've ever really had one, Shota said, not realizing that the bit about not knowing if she had ever truly had a home had been said aloud. Oh, I'm so sorry, Shota. I had hoped from what you said earlier that your family had at least cared before they learned about your quirk, Izu said to her. Shota was startled and realized that she must have verbalized the satyr part of her thought processes. Oh, don't worry about me, kiddo, I'm fine. It's been a very long time since I've seen any of them, Shota told Izu, hoping that he wouldn't dwell on what she had said any longer than he needed to. Alright, if that's what will make you happy, Shota, Izu told her and then continued. But don't bottle up all your feelings forever, it won't end well for you. I know, Shota said. Well, shall we head to your residence then, Aizawa? Shinso asked. Yes, we shall. Just so you know, we are walking there, so Shinso, if you need a break I can carry you, Shota told the pair. I should be fine walking, Aizawa, but thank you for the offer, Shinso said. Izu giggled as they walked out the gate and off of school grounds. They chatted a bit while they walked, and she ended up carrying Shinso on her back for about the last half of the way to her apartment. When they got to her apartment door, she asked Izu to grab her key from her satchel and unlock the door. They went inside and she set Shinso down on the couch. I'm going to go shower and get changed into some clothes that aren't my hero costume, so I'll be back shortly, Shota told the pair. All right, they both said. I'll bring you both something to wear instead of your uniforms. You can both take showers as well. There is a guest bathroom first door to the left in the hallway, Shota told them. Thank you, Shota, Izu said. Of course, Shota told them. She then turned around and went into her bedroom to change and grabbed the pair of boys some clothes. She found Bastard curled up on her bed and she went over to pet him. Shota grabbed some of her clothes that would probably fit them well enough and went back out to hand them to the boys. They thanked her and moved to take their own showers since neither of them ever dressed out of their gym uniforms. Shota went back into her own room and showered. She finished before the boys did, so she went to the kitchen and started cooking something for them to eat. She chose katsudon partly because it was one of the few things she could cook well, and partly because she was feeling sentimental today, and that old friend of hers had quite enjoyed her katsudon back in the day. The boys finished showering as she was dishing up the katsudon. Hey boys, I hope you don't mind, but I made some katsudon for us to eat. If you don't want it, that's fine and I can find you something else to eat, Shota told them. Shota, thank you so much. This looks delicious, Izu told her. Thanks, Izu. That means a lot, Shota told the kid. Well, shall we eat then? Shinso asked. Geez, Toshi, you sure are impatient, aren't you? Izu scolded his friend. Yes, I am. I am also very hungry, so don't tease me about it too, because every second I don't eat is a second closer to me eating, Shinso told the other boy. Izu giggled as if he hadn't just been threatened and sat down at the table, and Shota joined them. While they ate, Shota asked them both about how they had trained prior to the entrance exams since they worked so well together, and Izu had made it seem as if they spared regularly. She learned that they had known each other for only about 10 months now. They had been the ones who had recently cleaned up the nearby beach that had been used as an illegal dumping ground for quite a few years now. They had also done quite a bit of flexibility training and did parkour around the city to work on their agility. The sparring was just for practice, nothing specific there. They were both smart kids, and Izu in particular was incredible at analyzing things. He had worked on visual analysis of quirks, and using that analysis worked on possibilities of what the quirk he had analyzed could be used for. Shota was not anticipating such advanced observation and analysis from him. She had expected them to be pretty good, but this was beyond her expectations. Shota then let the conversation fall to other things as the evening went on. They moved over to the living room, and Bastard jumped up on her lap, yowling noisily, demanding attention. You are one needy cat, aren't you, Bastard? Shota asked the cat. You have a cat, Aizawa? Shinso asked. Yep, he's an annoying little thing, isn't he? Shota asked while answering the question. Not really, I think he's kind of cute, Shinso told her. Well, that's a personal choice. I think he's a bastard, so that's what I named him, Shota told Shinso. You don't seem like the type to give things cute names, but here you are naming your cat Bastard. It's adorable. Izu giggled while he told her that the cat's name was Cute. Cute was not exactly what I was going for, Shota said. Well, it is anyway, Izu responded. You know what, whatever you can think it's cute, I will use it as an insult to the cat, Shota said. Shota and the boys then spent a bit longer chatting, but eventually the both of them were yawning, and it was getting close to time for her to go on patrol. Shota considered not going on patrol tonight, but decided to go anyway, but needed to tell the pair. She stood up from the couch to make some coffee to keep her awake during patrol. The pair noticed and started to stand up to follow her, but she shook her head, signaling them to sit back down. What are you doing, Shota? Izu asked. I'm getting ready for my patrol since I've shifted to my school year patrol schedule, which has me start earlier and end earlier. But not really do less hours, unfortunately, Shota told them. Are you sure you trust us enough to leave us here alone? Shinso asked. I do. I'll show you where your rooms are before I go, but you can sleep in the same room if you feel more comfortable that way, Shota told them. All right then. We will probably not see you before tomorrow morning, correct? Shinso asked. Shota nodded. Probably not. I'll probably be back around 2 in the morning. Give or take however long it takes me to do reports, Shota told them, then showed the pair where they could sleep. She then changed into her costume and grabbed the weapons that she didn't carry during the school day. She grabbed her coffee and keys and then walked out the door. Her patrol was pretty uneventful, so she came back relatively uninjured. When she unlocked the door, she saw the boys asleep on the couch. Bastard was curled up next to them and looked content. Shota smiled at the sleeping boys and then went to treat her injuries. The next morning, Shota woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, which was unusual to say the least. She got out of bed slightly apprehensive since the smell of coffee indicated that there was another person in her apartment. She went out into the kitchen and saw the 2 boys who had made coffee for themselves and for her. She then remembered that she was giving the pair a place to stay. Thank you for the coffee, Shota told the kids. Of course, Shota, it was no problem, Izu told her. We should probably get ready for school soon, Shota told the pair of students. We probably should, but we have like 2 hours before school starts, although you probably need to be there earlier than the students to get the classroom ready and to do any paperwork that needs to get done, Shinso said. Unfortunately, yes, I do need to get to school before most students would even consider being on campus, Shota told the pair. All right, then we should probably get dressed, but our uniforms are still at school, Izu told her. That's fine, you can wear your gym uniforms there and grab your normal school uniforms when we get there, Shota told them. But our IDs are with our normal uniforms, Shinso told her. That's fine, I have my teacher ID. I can bring students who don't have their IDs on them, so you two will be fine, Shota told them. I guess that makes sense, but couldn't teachers just let random people into campus? Shinso asked. Technically, yes, we could. However, none of the teachers would usually let random people into the school, Shota told them. Yeah, Toshi, the teachers are heroes. That means they can do no wrong and would only do responsible things, Izu teased. That is not true. Don't hold heroes in quite so high esteem. They do bad things sometimes, Shota told the boys, warning them. They can't always save everyone, she added in a softer tone that gave the impression that she at some point had been unable to save someone she had truly cared about. The pair nodded in acknowledgement and then went to grab their clothes and get ready for school. Shota also got ready for the day and grabbed the coffee off the counter. When they were ready, her and the boys went out the door and off to school. Once they arrived on campus, Shota had to take them to the teacher's lounge so that she could get the key for the locker rooms. However, this meant that she would have to dodge the questions from her coworkers about the kids she was bringing with her. Thankfully, there were very few teachers here this early in the morning, and the ones that weren't the ones she was worried about being here to ask way too many questions. She grabbed the key off the hook and took the pair of boys to the locker rooms so that they could get changed into their normal uniforms and grab the rest of their stuff from their lockers, and thankfully their backpacks had the stuff that they needed for school for every day, unlike some students who only carried what they needed for that specific day. They went back to the teacher's lounge to drop off the key, but unfortunately Nimiri had arrived in the teacher's lounge while they were off in the locker room. "Shota, good morning," Nimiri exclaimed when she saw Shota. "Good morning to you too, Nimiri. However, it is far too early in the morning for you to be quite so energetic," Shota told the bubbly woman. If you say so, Shota. Hey, what's up with the pair of cuties you have with you? You normally don't have students following you around." Nimiri asked the dreaded questions. Shota walked over to the key rack and grabbed her classroom key off the hook and placed the locker room key back onto its hook. "Hey, you two, take this and go ahead to the classroom. I'll join you soon. I just need to answer about 1,000,000 questions regarding why you are here," Shota told the pair. They looked just a bit guilty but took the key and headed off to the classroom anyway. "So Shota, who are the kids that were following you around?" Nimiri asked. "There's some kids that are living with me for the time being," Shota told her. "Oh, why are they living with you?" Nimiri asked. "Because their home situations aren't great, and I have taken them as personal students, so they are staying with me," Shota told her. "You took 2 personal students at the same time?" Nimiri asked, shocked. "Yes, I did. Is there a problem with that?" Shota asked. "No, there's no problem with it, but it's not something that you've ever done and I'm just surprised, that's all," Nimiri told her. "Well then, I will be going to class now. Have a good day." "Wait, Nimiri started to call out to her, but Shota shut the door before she could finish. Shota walked to her classroom and saw that the pair had sat down in chairs on the other side of her desk, having left the key on the desk corner, and were going through her notes on students that had been left there. They were discussing the differences in personality and the compatibility between the other students. Shota smiled and sat down on her side of the desk, pointing at one part of her notes and telling them that the groups who were currently sitting together were relatively compatible so that they didn't kill each other. They were surprised at the thoroughness of her personality notes and were even more surprised at the thoroughness of her battle analysis when she handed the notes that had everything she had done so far. They chatted about fighting styles and how some of their classmates' quirks would be well suited for rescue and some were best used for combat. The ones that they talked about most were the ones whose quirks were well suited to collecting information about those around them and their enemies. They were talking about what they could learn from those quirks to improve their own awareness of the world around them. Shota also inquired about how they thought that their peers' quirks could be improved via teaching. While they all should probably increase their capacity for use of their quirk, especially Kaminari-kun and Momo-chan, but Bakugo should also work on the size of his explosions and the duration during which he can continue his explosions safely. Izu told her based on his analysis of them during sparring yesterday. "Yes, I was planning on having them work on that." "Anything else?" Shota asked. "They could all do some teamwork building exercises. It would greatly help them, especially Bakugo," Shinzo told her. "Yes, it would," Shota told them. They chatted for a while until Ada came into the room and disturbed them. "You two should not be distracting the teacher with idle chatter before class starts," Ada told them. "Ada, it's fine. They were having a very interesting conversation with me. They actually were discussing how we can improve your guys' quirks. So do you have any input on how to improve your own and your peers' quirks?" Shota asked Ada. I know, not really. It's not really my place to tell you how to teach us," Ada told her. While I say that input from students can be very useful for a teacher since only you know what you really need to work on," Shota told Ada. "Oh well, I still believe it's not my place, so I will leave you 3 to your conversation," Ada told them and then went to his seat. The pair of students in front of her also stood up to head to their seats, and Shota pulled her computer out of her bag and started to input her notes from yesterday into the system. While she was not nearly as fast at it as Nezu was, she was still quite practiced at it, so it was still a relatively quick process. Shortly after Ada had come into the room, the rest of the students arrived and started to take their seats or gather around other students' desks to chat with their peers. Shota watched as her students mingled and seemed to form relatively distinct groups of people, and you could tell if you looked closely enough who had a crush on who. It surprised her how well this class hid crushes. Usually they were quite bad at it, but this particular group was quite good at it. Shota also noticed that she had somehow ended up with a class Nimiri would love, since all but one of the crushes were on someone of the same gender. She had a feeling that the teachers would end up betting on whether or not they would get together. Shota knew that they did this and was fine with it as long as they weren't too directly interfering with her students' relationships. Partnering them for projects was fine, but forcing them into uncomfortable situations intentionally was not. Shota was loath to interrupt the calm, relaxed and friendly atmosphere that hung over the classroom right now. However, the bell was about to ring and she needed them in their seats for attendance. "All right, the bell is about to ring, so please head to your seats so I can take attendance," Shota called out, startling all of the students. The ones who were out of their seats scurried back to their seats as fast as they could, and the ones in their seats looked concerned about those who weren't. The bell rang and Shota called out attendance. She almost went back to her desk but then remembered that she had 2 announcements to give, so she turned back to the class and addressed them. "Okay, Hellspawn, I have 2 things to tell you. 1, your costumes should be ready now. The support crew has until the end of the day to finish them, but most are ready for you. We are going to the USJ tomorrow, so be prepared to do some rescue training. This will also be the first time that you use your costumes," Shota told the class. "Any questions?" A few hands raised. "All right then, Kaminari, what's your question? So what does doing rescue training involve? Are there real people who will be pretending to be trapped after a villain attack or natural disaster, or will we be working with dummies?" he asked. "That is a good question, Kaminari. However, I'm unsure of what you will be doing since I'm not the one running the class. I'm only there as a chaperone for you all," Shota told Kaminari. The other hands that had been raised lowered clearly, having wanted to ask about what they would be doing. She was impressed at how many kids were interested in what they would be doing. Shota looked and didn't see any more hands raised, so she moved from the podium and sat down at her desk, telling the students that this was a free period. The morning classes were pretty calm, and so was lunch. Her and the problem children chatted while they ate in the classroom. The afternoon classes were also calm, and she got more subject-specific notes on her students. She knew that classes would be less and less calm as the year went on, so she took this opportunity to take detailed notes that she may not be able to take later in the year. The bell rang and she told the kids that they could head home. Shota looked at the pair of students who remained in the classroom, and they stood up and walked over to her desk. She started putting the papers with her notes into piles and clipping them together. The pair stood on the other side of her desk and waited for her to be ready. Once she had put all of her stuff into her satchel, she stood up from her desk and grabbed her classroom key. "All right, I have to drop this off in the teacher's lounge and then we can go," Shota told the pair. "Hey Shota, can we get some practice in with our scarves today?" Izu asked. "Oh yeah, we can. That's fine. Let me drop the key off in the teacher's lounge and then we can get started," Shota told them. "Can we change into our gym uniforms for this?" Shinso asked. "Yeah, you can. The locker rooms won't be locked for a while still, since students can stay after school to do some training, and teachers will work with personal students during this time," Shota told them. They went to change and she went to the teacher's lounge to drop off the key. She met them at the locker rooms and took them out to ground beta. She was planning on teaching them how to use their scarf for mobility. "So what are we doing today, Aizawa?" Shinso asked. "We are going to work on using your scarves for additional mobility, so getting up on things like buildings and getting across gaps in between roofs," Shota told them. "That sounds both fun and useful," Izu said. "Well, you will get practical experience most days, since I usually get to campus by crossing the rooftops. It's quite a bit faster," Shota told them. "Somehow that doesn't surprise me about you, Shota," Izu said. "Hey, why do I seem like the kind of person to get around on rooftops?" Shota asked. "I'm not sure why, but you just seem like the type," Izu told her. "Well, think about it a little more and get back to me about that," Shota told him. "Oh, I will. It might just be your vibe though," Izu told her. "Well, if it is, that is a rather unhelpful answer," Shota said. She rolled her eyes and explained how to use the scarf properly for going up onto buildings and crossing larger gaps. Shota ended up demonstrating how to do it, then assisted them as they figured it out. Then once the pair was confident, she decided to get her own practice in. They all swung around for a few hours, and eventually it was time to head back to her apartment, so she told the pair to go grab their stuff from the locker rooms and meet her by the front gate of campus. The pair went off to change and grab their bags, and she went off to the front gate grabbing her own bag as she made her way there. She crouched down, balancing on the balls of her feet, and waited for the problem children to meet her at the gate. While she waited, she thought about what would happen to these kids once they found a good home and left her, and she would only see them during the school day and a few hours after. She figured that it would go back to being quite lonely for her. Her apartment would be much quieter in the mornings, and she would only have a cat to care for. There would be no one there when she got back at ungodly hours of the morning, her having gone out on patrol thinking that they were who she needed to protect. It would be so much more empty for her, and she didn't want that. But also, what would they think of her wishing that they would stay with her long term? Would they think her selfish, or would they appreciate the care? Shota suddenly remembered the adoption papers that were in the pile of papers from Nezu that she had whacked off her desk yesterday, and she realized that Nezu had known that she would get attached to the kids and had provided her an option to take them in permanently. God, she hated just how well he knew her. "Shota, sorry to keep you waiting," Izu called out to her. Shota stood up from her crouched position and turned towards the problem children running to her. "Are you two ready to head back to the apartment?" Shota asked as they got to her. "Yep, we are ready to go. And Toshi won't need to be carried today," Izu told her. I should hope not, since we are going back via the rooftops, so it would be kind of difficult to carry him all that way. Shota told them. Alright, but you will need to lead since we have no idea where we are going really. Shinso said. Yes, I know, Shinso. I will go a bit slower than usual to compensate for you two problem children not knowing where to go and only having a few hours of practice with this way of using your scarves. Shota told them. You sound like you're insulting us, Aizawa. Shinso said, rolling his eyes. Well, it's not, I promise you. Shota told him. Anyway, shall we get going? Izu asked. Yes, we shall, Shota told the boy. Shota jumped up off the ground, throwing her capture weapon up at the same post that she always used to get up on the first building. Once she was up on the building, the problem children followed her up, and then they all headed back to the apartment. The problem children following her all the way, trying to learn the route so that they could do this on their own at some point. Shota smiled to herself as they reached her apartment. Perhaps these two would leave her one day, but today was not that day, and she would take advantage of the day and all the days to come and enjoy the pair's presence and how lively her apartment became. Shota unlocked the door to the apartment and went inside, letting the kids in after her. Shota told them that they should get them some actual clothes instead of them just using hers, since that was probably uncomfortable for them. They said that they were fine, but Shota told them that they were going out anyway since she needed to get groceries. The pair just sighed and followed her to a clothing store, and they picked up enough clothing for about a week. They also dropped by the grocery store and got stuff for the week, since Shota usually only had one person and a cat to feed. They then headed back to the apartment and changed into more relaxed clothing, and they all just chilled in the living room, Shota reading a book with Bastard in her lap and the pair doing their homework for the day. The time for Shota to head out for patrol came around, and she went and got changed back into her hero costume and grabbed her weapons. Are you heading out for patrol, Shota? Izu asked. Yeah, I've got to head out now, but I'll be back by the time you wake up to get ready for school, Shota told Izu. Well, see you in the morning then, Shota. Stay safe, alright? Izu told her. I will, kiddo. I'll be more careful than usual with my own safety. I'll come home as uninjured as I can, Shota reassured the kid. Thank you. I'll hold you to that, Izu told her. Haha, alright then. I'll try to not wake you guys up when I get back, since I would assume that Shinso at least won't be moving from there, since I doubt that you would risk waking him up by trying to move him to a bed, Shota told him. Yeah, I won't move him, and I'll also stay out here. It feels more comfortable for me anyway, Izu said, Shinso asleep on his shoulder. Alright then, see you in the morning, whether I accidentally wake you up or I see you when we all get up and get ready for school, seeing as I get back very early in the morning, Shota told Izu, and then headed out for patrol. When she got back, she only had a few scratches and some bruises. When she opened the apartment door, she saw Izu was fast asleep and unlikely to be accidentally woken. She smiled at the sight of her problem children sleeping so peacefully. She then went and got ready for bed. The day of the USJ incident. The next morning, Shota awoke yet again to the smell of coffee being brewed and smiled. She got out of bed and put on her costume along with the weapons that she wouldn't normally take to school but would take today for the USJ training, so that way she could help students who didn't have the proper tools available to them. Shota walked out of her bedroom and greeted the problem children. Shinso was making eggs for all of them, and Izu was brewing them coffee. Izu was the one who noticed her first. Good morning, Shota. Were you injured during patrol last night, or did you keep your promise? Izu asked. I only have some cuts and bruises, nothing major today. I was quite careful during any scuffles I had, Shota told him. Thank you for keeping your promise then, Shota. I do appreciate it. Now Toshi should be done with breakfast soon, so we should eat and head out soon, Izu said. Yes, we should, and thank you for making breakfast. I'm not the best cook, so whatever you make will be more appetizing than what I could make, Shota told them. You can cook quite well. Katsudon is a complicated dish to get right, and you made it wonderfully, Izu told her. Aizawa, he loves katsudon quite a lot, so that was quite high praise, Shinso told her. Well, thank you then. I got so good at it since a friend of mine back in high school really enjoyed katsudon, so I'm glad that there is someone who enjoys it so much again. It will justify how much I make it out of habit, Shota said. I'm glad that I can make you happy with my enjoyment of your food then, Izu told her. Alright, you two. Breakfast is ready, so come dish up and then let's eat, Shinso called them. The pair of them moved over to Shinso and dished up their breakfast, and Izu handed them both coffee and grabbed his own. Shota was surprised that her coffee was the way that she liked it, since Izu had only seen her make herself coffee 3 times now. She shrugged, knowing he was observant, so he had probably used those skills to help him make her coffee, and sat down at the table with the pair. They ate their breakfast, and Shota told them to put on their uniforms and she would take care of the dishes since they had made breakfast. Alright, are you two ready to go then? Shota asked them when they came back to the living room dressed in uniforms with their scarves around their necks. Yep, we are ready to go, Shota, Izu said. Shota noticed that Izu's tie was tied a bit funny, so she stepped over to the boy and redid his tie. Aw, thank you, Shota. I've never been particularly good at tying my own tie, Izu said. Of course, problem child. I can teach you how to do it yourself, or I can just do it for you in the morning, Shota told him. I think that it would be better for you to do it in the mornings. It'll be quicker. Izu told her. Alright, I can do that for you. Now should we get going? Shota asked the boys. Yep, let's head to school. Today should be fun. Izu said. They all went up onto the roof and headed for UA. They got there faster than they had returned to the apartment the day before, since the problem children had a general idea as to where they needed to go now. It was still a bit slower than Shota going on her own, but she was fine with that. Once they got to UA, they went to the teacher's lounge to collect the classroom key and dodge all the unnecessary questions from Nimiri and Hisashi. The trio sat down at her desk in the classroom and chatted for about an hour and a half before Ida arrived to class and had some questions for her about the protocol for the day. Shota explained to him how they would get to the USJ, and then the rest of the day was up to the instructor for the class. Ida asked who the instructor would be, and Shota told him that he would find out once they got there. He sighed and went to sit in his seat. The trio switched to sign language for their conversation, since Ida didn't really need to know what they were talking about. Eventually, the rest of the students started to arrive, seeming excited to basically have a field trip for class. Once the bell rang, the problem children stood up from her desk and moved over to their own desks. Shota also rose from her desk and moved to the podium to indicate that the students needed to head to their seats. Shota called roll, confirming that no one was absent that day. She then told them that their costumes were ready and that they would have about 20 minutes to get changed into their costumes and then return to the classroom. The racks holding their costumes popped out and they were told which one to grab, and then they went off to get changed. The problem children were the first two back, since they both had functional and non-flashy costumes. They gave her the capture weapons they had borrowed from her, and she put them in a pile behind her desk, and they sat down across from her and they chatted for a while until the rest of the students returned to the classroom. They all had much flashier costumes, and some had support items to help them with quirk improvement. Hagakir's costume was currently visible, but she was not, and Shota asked if Powerloader had done her costume right and she could turn it invisible. Hagakir giggled and then disappeared from view entirely. Suddenly her voice was much closer to Shota as she said, "Yep, he did super well. It's adorable when you can see it, but it can go invisible so that I don't have to strip to be invisible. It's so nice," she said as her clothes returned to view. Shota noticed that she had glasses on, so she asked if she would wear contacts during fighting usually, since glasses can break more easily. Hagakir confirmed that she would usually wear contacts with her hero costume, but she had forgotten to grab them this morning. "That's good. It was you and Yaoyorozu who I was worried about your costumes being super uncomfortable, since both of your quirks require open skin, but Yaoyorozu seems to cover her quite well and seems to work properly as well. But perhaps you should get contacts that stay in your hero costume case," Shota said. Yep, it does. She was talking about how much she appreciated the fact that she could use her quirk through the fabric. "You're right, I should just keep some contacts in my costume case. That would be smart. It would also be harder to forget them," Hagakir said. "Hey Aizawa-sensei, why are there 3 of you now?" Mina asked her. "There aren't 3 of me. Shinso and Izu just happen to also have darker colored nondescript costumes," Shota told her. "Well, yeah, that may be true, but they have the same scarves around their necks that you do. They also have the throwing knives that you do today. They look kind of like mini-senseis, especially Midoriya with the staff too. Their costumes also appear to be based around yours with the way they were sewn," Mina said to her. Fair enough, I guess. Also, that's quite observant that you noticed the sewing patterns," Shota said. "Why is your costume different today than the last few days anyway? You have throwing knives and a staff at your waist when you normally just have your belt and whatever's in it," Mina asked. "Because I will be providing you all assistance during this training so that you will get used to both having a hero join you partway through a rescue, and I can also provide pointers since I have quite a bit more experience working in this field," Shota told them. "That's a smart thing to do, sensei. We will learn quite a bit from you, I'm certain," Ida said. "Well, it will depend on the situation, since I'm more well-versed in some areas than others. Since I do most of my work at night, I don't need to do a lot of rescue work, so this isn't my specialty. Now we should head out to the bus so we can arrive on time," Shota told them, then led them out to the bus. The bus ride to the USJ was rather noisy at the beginning, but the most notable thing that also caused the bus to go silent for the rest of the trip there was when Tsu asked Izu why he had enrolled at UA when he was quirkless. "Hey Midoriya-kun, if you're quirkless, why did you choose to put yourself in so much more danger by becoming a hero? I'm not asking this to be offensive to you. I'm simply curious as to why this is what you chose. I think that most people would be afraid to step into the role of a hero because they are more likely to lose their lives in combat. I'm not looking down on you. In reality, I admire you for having the courage to step into this role despite the extra danger that being quirkless brings to what we will be doing." "Oh well, I think that I accepted the extra danger that this would pose to me and chose to do this knowing that it may lead to the loss of my own life," Izu told her. The rest of the bus had fallen silent when Tsu had asked her question, and they stayed silent for the rest of the bus ride to the USJ. When they arrived at the USJ building, the students stayed quiet as they walked in. Shota was almost impressed at how quiet the class could get if they were posed with the thought of their own mortality and the possibly deadly consequences of making a mistake in this line of work. 13 was waiting inside and on the top of the stairs. Hello, students of UA. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, otherwise known as the USJ. Today you will be doing some basic rescue training and will work in small groups with Aizawa-san moving between groups to give advice. 13 told them. Will we be allowed to use our quirks during this exercise, 13 Sensei? Ada asked. Yes, you indeed will. This training is also meant to help teach you that your quirks can be used to both help and harm in rescue situation. Take my quirk as an example. My quirk Black Hole can be used to suck up anything and turn it into dust. While this quirk is good for rescue purposes, it can also be very dangerous for those I am trying to save. I may accidentally turn someone into dust. Some of you have quirks like that. They can easily be deadly if you take one wrong step. I hope that you leave here today with an understanding that your quirks are meant for helping people, not hurting them. Thank you for listening. Now let's get started. 13 said. Wow, you even have fake villains for us to deal with as well? That's well thought out. Kirishima said. What do you mean, Kirishima? There shouldn't be anyone but us in here. Shota asks. Well, if they aren't supposed to be here, then why are they here? This is UA. Real villains should know better than to attack here of all places, Kirishima exclaimed, pointing behind Shota. Shota turned around to face the main plaza and saw a large group of villains exiting a portal. All of you gather together and don't move. Those are real villains. They will have no qualms about hurting you. 13 Protect the students, Shota told 13 and the students. Shota prepared to throw herself down the stairs to engage the villains but was stopped momentarily at the calling of her name. Shota, wait. It's too dangerous to jump into this fight alone. Let us help you, or at least let 13 help you. Izu called to her. I most certainly can't let you all help. It's far too dangerous, and someone needs to stay up here with you guys to protect you, so 13 can't help me. Shota told the kid. Then at least promise me that you will be as safe as your protection-driven impulsive self can be during this fight. Don't take unnecessary risks and use your analysis skills to your advantage. Izu said, clearly not going to take no for an answer. All right, I will, Izu, for your sake and the sake of your classmates, Shota told him. Thank you. All right, if you're going to fight them, then you should probably get down there and fight them. Be careful, Shota, Izu said. Shota smiled at the kid and then she pulled her goggles up over her eyes, concealing where her gaze was, and proceeded to jump down the stairs leading to the main plaza and began fighting the villains who were now all out of the portal. The portal in question turned out to be a quirk that turned the user into purple mist, it seemed. Whatever, she would deal with that later. For now, she needed to eliminate the threat to her students. Izuku Midoriya's POV. Izuku watched as Shota leaped down the stairs into the main plaza area and started fighting the villains down there. His attention was returned to the people around him when he felt Toshi rest his hand on his shoulder and whisper, Hey Izu, she said that she would be careful, and I believe in the fact that she meant it. She will be okay. You don't need to worry this much. Thanks, Toshi. I know that she meant it, but that doesn't stop me from worrying about her, Izu told him in response. Well, that's true, but you really should worry less. She is a pro hero after all. This is kinda her job, Toshi said, trying to reassure Izu. I really can't help doing it. I don't want to see her getting hurt just to protect all of us. It would make me feel guilty. I'm not worthy of her protection like everyone else here is. I'm just a quirkless Deku, Izu said. Hey Izuku, don't think about yourself like that. You are just as worthy of Aizawa's protection as anyone else here, if not more deserving, because you are a very skilled fighter, and sometimes people like you need someone to stand up for them and protect them, just like she's doing for you right now, Toshi told him. I know. It's just a hard habit to break when you've been conditioned to think that way about yourself for most of your life. Eventually I'll overcome the hurdle, but today is not that day, Izu said. Well, as long as you know there will be a someday, Izu, I'm happy, Toshi said. Kaminari-kun, could you use your quirk to get in communication with the main school building? 13 asked, bringing both of their attentions back to the situation at hand. I can try. Well, can you? No, something is blocking it. So one of them must have a quirk that can restrict our ability to communicate then. That's not good for us. We'll receive no support from the main building via remote communication then, 13 said. Sensei, I can run back to the main building to get help faster than anyone else here, Ada says. All right, then go get out of here. Get the other teachers. Not so fast, young hero. I can't allow you to do that. It would be rather unfortunate for us, a voice said, while a figure made of swirling deep violet mist that faded to a much lighter purple as you got closer to the edges formed in front of them. So Kurogiri was here. That must mean that Tenko was here too. He would need to be careful. They were probably about to be scattered then. Ada, I'll distract him now, go, 13 said as she began to use her quirk on Kurogiri. Ada ran for the exit, barely making it out before the doors closed behind him. But he was now out of the picture and was safe from the mist. Suddenly the mist appeared behind 13 and basically bounced her black hole back at her, causing a significant injury and incapacitating her. "Oi, you stupid mist person, you can't just turn someone's quirk back at them, you have to actually fight them. Just like what I'm about to do to you," Bakugo shouted as he rushed forward at Kurogiri. Kirishima didn't make any speeches, he just ran up and attacked. The mist making up Kurogiri's body scattered a bit but quickly reformed, pretty much proving to the other students that this person didn't really have a physical form and they were almost entirely mist. Suddenly the deep violet mist was thickly swirling around them, and then they were getting placed in different areas of the USJ, separating them into small groups quite effectively. The last thing they heard was Kurogiri telling them that they were being separated into groups and scattered around the different disaster areas so that they couldn't be an inconvenience. Izu knew that Kurogiri's quirk was being used against him right now, but he still couldn't help but admire how pretty it was and how useful it was to everyone. There were so many possible uses for it, and he really did want to test some of his theories based on what he knew about the original quirk function, and he wanted to see if some of those functions still remain. But now wasn't the time. When Izu looked around at his new surroundings, he saw that he appeared to be in a ruined city of sorts. He also saw that he wasn't alone. Some people who seemed to be villains were fighting with some kids who appeared to be hero students. Izu started to move towards the group who was fighting and reached to his belt to grab his throwing knives. He used his scarf to gain a better vantage point in an abandoned building where he was unlikely to be noticed, and started throwing his knives down at the villains, making sure to only cause them to be more vulnerable to the hero student, who captured them once they were incapacitated. The first knife he threw hit a man who was about to attack Toshi, and he didn't want Toshi getting hurt. Once the villains were all captured, Izu jumped down from his hiding spot and joined the 3 other students who were there with him. Toshi walked over to him and handed him his throwing knives. "Aw, thank you, Toshi. So we're in this mess together then," Izu said, thanking him for his knives. "Seems so, although I knew that as soon as throwing knives started coming from somewhere unknown. It was almost certainly you," Toshi said. "Nice to know that you know me so well that the throwing knives were clearly mine," Izu said sarcastically. "Well, I don't think that any other student here uses throwing knives, and Aizawa is a bit indisposed right now, so it probably wasn't her. I also doubt the villains would throw knives from a concealed place to harm their own comrades. They may be villains, but they are loyal to each other most of the time. Also, they don't seem smart enough to find a concealed place to throw knives from in the first place," Toshi said to him. "Fair enough assessment. Now shall we get moving towards the plaza? Since we're down here now, we should try and make ourselves useful to Shota," Izu said. "Actually, before we do that, we got one of the villains to talk, and he said that there was another group in the area, so I think that we should find and deal with them first," Toshi said. "We should do that. Alright then, let's do that. Oh, and also a quick introduction, even though you two sit right in front of us. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and this is Hitoshi Shinso," Izu told the other 2 boys. "Denki Kaminari, nice to meet you too. You guys seem to be like super cool and work well together. I'm Shoto Todoroki. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Well, now that we know names, let's get moving," Izu said. Mina Ashido's POV. "God, it was hot here." Mina was pretty annoyed that the area she had gotten teleported to was the fire zone. However, she was okay with the fact that the people she was with were Ejiro and that Bakugo kid. Well, Ejiro was fine. She knew him in junior high, but she had barely spoken to this Bakugo kid. All the interactions she had seen with the teacher had been kind of violent and consisted of a lot of shouting, and he had tried to attack Aizawa-sensei once. Well, for now she would need to trust him, since they would all have to work together to get out of this situation. She moved towards the pair who were arguing a little ways away from her. "Hey, you two, shouldn't we start heading towards the way out so we can meet up with the rest of the class?" she asked when she made it over to them. "Shut up, you stupid extra. You think I don't know that? We need to restrain all of the villains in the area first. They ran away when we showed up, so we need to go after them, but Shitty Hair here says that we should just find a way out and they won't know any better, so we would be safe and so would our classmate. So Extra be our tiebreaker and chose whether we just leave or we deal with the villains," Bakugo shouted. "I say that we apprehend the villains because that is the more heroic thing to do. Also, I think that it would be more helpful than just running away to find a teacher," Mina said. "Alright then, let's go find them, Shitty Hair and Raccoon Eyes," Bakugo shouted, then started to move away from them to find the villains who had run away. The trio walked around the area, capturing the villains who had scattered when they had appeared. Once they had covered the whole area, they headed for the exit so they could find the rest of the class. Kyoka Jiro's POV. "Hey Takoyami, do you think that you could use Dark Shadow to knock them out?" Jiro asked. "Yes, technically I can. However, I think that it will be easier for us all to work together to attack them. Dark Shadow is not long enough to restrain all of them," he said. "I can make some restraints so they can't escape," Momo said, a plan forming in Jiro's mind. "Alright Momo, can you make the restraints, and Takoyami, can you help me knock the villains out so that Momo can restrain them while she follows behind us?" Jiro asked. "Yeah, I can do that. Of course, you can count on me." "Alright then, let's go." Jiro and Takoyami jumped down and knocked out the villains with some difficulty, but it wasn't too hard, and Momo followed behind, restraining the villains as she went. Because they had snuck up on all of the villains, they had gone entirely unnoticed by the main group, which led to their advantage. When they snuck up on a villain, Takoyami would cover their mouths with dark shadow so they would stay quiet while Gyro knocked them out. They finished up with the last villain in the group waiting for them and discussed what their next step should be. Hey Momo, you did a really good job tying up those villains. Thanks for that, and thanks for giving me the idea that I built the plan on. Gyro said, well, you're welcome for the idea and thank you for the praise. I don't often get praise from others on something other than my personality or academics. Momo said, well, your practical skills are amazing and are very useful to us. You should be praised for them more. Gyro told her, well, thank you. What should we do now? Should we stay here or should we head for the main plaza? Momo asked, I think that heading to the plaza would be the most to our benefit. Staying here might end with them escaping their bonds somehow, or backup being sent to help them. Gyro said, then let's make our way there. For our safety, and if we head to the main plaza we can help Aizawa-sensei a bit. Momo said. Toru Hagakura's POV. Toru was shaking just a bit from fear. She was surrounded by villains and there was no one around that she could see that would help her. She shifted her costume invisible and got ready to fight the man who seemed to be the leader of this little group. Hey you all, why are you just staring at empty air? Are you all idiots or are you all hallucinating something? Well, either way you should come fight me since I'm, well you know, here. Ajiro called down to the group. Maybe we will. Let's see how cocky you are when we are surrounding you and you can't fight back. One of them called. Well, you don't need to come up here to do that, I'll come down to you. He called back. He then jumped down from the pile of rubble he was perched on and began to fight with the villains who had just been surrounding her. Sato, now would be the time for you to join me. He called to nothing. Suddenly a boy appeared out of seemingly nowhere and joined Ajiro in the fight. After a while they had knocked all of the villains unconscious and Toru shifted completely visible again, startling Ajiro a bit since most of the class hadn't seen her completely visible yet. She wore gloves during class so the teachers could see if she raised her hand. So the most her class had really seen was her figure where her hero costume and uniform were. Hey, thanks for saving me like that, Ajiro. It was really heroic of you. It was also a very smart way to get their attention off of me. She said to him, oh, don't worry about it. It was just the reasonable thing to do. Anyone could have done it. Ajiro told her. Well, it was still quite the heroic thing to do and I greatly appreciate it. Toru told him. Well, thank you. Now shall we go find the rest of the class? Ajiro asked. Yes, I think we should. Toru said. They then started walking down to the main plaza to meet up with the rest of the class. Suiwasui's POV. Her first thought was that the villain who dispersed them across the USJ had fucked up. They had dropped her into the shipwreck zone. She quickly looked around underwater for any of her classmates since she didn't know who had been thrown here with her. She saw that cute girl whose name she couldn't quite remember, but she appeared to be struggling to swim. Then she noticed the villain who was attacking her. Sue acted quickly and used her tongue to pull the villain off of the girl, then grabbed her by the waist and jumped out of the water and onto the boat. She also saw the kid who seemed to be swimming over to the boat. Sue used her tongue to pull him up onto the boat with them. Hey, are you okay? Sue asked the girl. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you for getting him off of me. I thought I was going to drown. The girl said. Yeah, of course. I think that the villain who dispersed us made a mistake putting me here. This is my element he gave me and those with me an advantage. By the way, what are your names? I don't remember them. If you've already told me, I'm sorry. Sue asked. Oh, it's no problem. My name is Ochako Uraraka. I'm Kota Koji. Pleased to meet you. Well, I'm Tsuyu, but please call me Tsu. Well then, shall we figure out how to deal with these villains or get across the water without getting attacked? Sue asked the other two with her. Yes, I suppose we should, but I have no idea how. Sue-chan, could you lure them out of the water so that we can deal with them together, or could you fight them all alone? Wait, no, that would be far too dangerous for you. I can't let you fight all of them alone. You will almost certainly get hurt and I don't want that. Ochako started to ramble, clearly still shaken by the villain almost drowning her. Hey Ochako-chan, calm down a little. Let's look around the boat and see if there's anything useful on here to help us fight them. Sue said while rubbing Ochako's back to comfort her. Right. Alright, let's look around then. Ochako said. The trio then proceeded to look around the ship for things that would help them fight the villains who were in the water. They found some supplies to make a few Molotov cocktails and some long poles that can be used to hit the villains on the head, knocking them out. They chose to just knock them out, and then Uraraka would make herself and Kota weightless, and then Sue would jump over to the main plaza. Alright then, shall we begin kicking these villains' asses? Uraraka asked. Yep, and I'm ready to get us across after that. Sue said. They knocked out the villains, and then Uraraka made Kota and herself weightless, and Sue jumped them across the water. They landed in the water on the very edge of the main plaza. Izuku Midoriya's POV. Alright, are all of them restrained? Izu asked. Yep, since these dudes are not a problem, should we head down to the plaza now to kick some more villain ass? Denki asked. Yes, we should. Let's make ourselves useful to Shota then. Izu says, "Hey Madabra, why do you call Aizawa-sensei by her first name instead of a title? You guys seem close but it still sounds a little rude." Denki asked him. "Yes, it would be for most people, but I have permission to call her that. She's done so much for me and Toshi that it would feel weird calling her sensei, but I suppose I probably should, but I won't. She told me to call her whatever made me the most comfortable, so I've been calling her by first name." Izu said, half to Denki and half to himself. "Well, I guess that makes sense, but what did she do for you guys?" Denki asked. "She let us live with her when we had nowhere else to go once we'd been pulled from our homes. Oh, for context, we were both abused in the homes we came from. So we currently live with Shota and we are most definitely happier where we are now. Sorry for just randomly saying shit like that. It's rather rude to just say shit like that." Izu said, "Hey, it's fine. I get word vomiting about things and I'm sorry if I brought up something that might hurt you." Denki said, "Alright then. And no, it doesn't really hurt to talk about since I distanced myself from the pain and Ko's words could've, but that didn't mean that I wanted to stay in that house." Izu told him, "Well, I'm glad that you're both okay and that you're both here." Denki said, "Thank you, Denki. Now let's go help out Shota." Izu said to the group, "Alright then, let's get going." Toshi said. The group began to work their way down to the plaza. They didn't encounter any difficulties on the way down because Todoroki would make himself and Denki ice bridges to cross large gaps in between the buildings, and Izu and Toshi used their scarves to jump over the gaps. Once they got to where they could easily see the plaza, they stopped in the cover of some bushes and trees on the edge of the plaza so that they could observe the fight currently happening. Izu began to do a quick analysis of the situation and determine if it would be better for them to jump into the fight or for them to go find the rest of the class. He then noticed who Shota was fighting, and it was Shigaraki. He then decided that he needed to get involved with this fight since he knew what he was doing when dealing with Tamura. Well, Tenko was his adopted brother after all. That's also how he knew Kirigiri so well. He had spent quite a bit of time with his father, adoptive brother, and Kirigiri. He knew that they would interfere at UA, so he and Tenko had spoken before the year started, and he was pulled from Inko's house that he would know nothing of the LOV's plans and he would give no information to the LOV about UA. He could have stayed at the bar after getting removed from Inko's house, but he decided that he would rather stay with Shota than FO and Tenko. It would be a bit easier to be a hero when he didn't have to deal with the world's #1 villain anytime he was at home. Not that he didn't care about his father and brother at all, but he did want to be a hero. He then looked to the side of him at the other students who were waiting on his word on whether to jump into the fight or not. He considered telling them to go find the rest of the class and jump into the fight on his own, but realized that they would probably follow him into the fight anyway. "Alright, I think that getting involved with this fight will be helpful to Shota, so let's do this thing, but let me take the lead. And stay out of the fight until I light a flare and toss it up in the air. That's your signal to join the fight," Izu told them. They nodded and followed him out into the main plaza. "Oi Tamura, what are you doing targeting a lone woman? This is unlike you, Tenko," Izu shouted. "She's the one who jumped at me first, Zuko. I'm not at fault for fighting her alone. If you're so opposed to her fighting me alone, then come fight me, you coward. Or are you too scared of me?" Shigaraki called to him. "Oh, I'll gladly fight you. In fairness, you should be afraid of me," Izu yelled. "Oh, why should I be afraid of you, Zuko? You're just a little kid who just so happens to know how to fight," Shigaraki called back. "I also happen to have sparred with you countless times and know quite well how you fight. So I have very few worries about fighting you, Tenko. The only thing I'm even mildly concerned about is your quirk, but that's still something I know how to deal with," Izu told him. "Izu, what are you doing? Get out of here. It's too dangerous," Shota called out to him, taking her attention off of Tamura, giving him an opportunity to strike out at her. Izu began to cross the plaza as fast as he could, leaving the rest of the group behind at the edge of the plaza. He knew that she wouldn't be able to win against him alone right now, so he needed to step in as soon as he could. "Shota, don't pay attention to me, pay attention to him. If he touches you with all 5 of his fingers, his quirk will activate and it will start to disintegrate you," Izu called to her, still rushing across the plaza, his staff ready to block Tenko's hand from making contact with Shota. Shota turned her attention back to Tenko and moved to dodge the hand that was reaching for her. His hand would have connected with her if a long pole hadn't flashed in between them, stopping Tenko's hand. "Izu, Zuko, why are you over here? It's dangerous and you shouldn't get involved," Shota told him. "Well, seeing as I've sparred with my brother quite a lot, so I know what I need to do to win and I know what to avoid," Izu told her. "Wait, did you just call him your brother? Are you two related?" Shota asked. "Only by adoption. Dad adopted him after him and Inko got divorced," Izu said. "So did you know that this was going to happen?" Shota asked. "Nope. Before the school year started, we had a conversation about whether or not I would just live with him and Dad or whether I would become a ward of UA. I clearly chose the second option. Trying to become a hero while living with 2 of the most powerful villains doesn't sound like a very productive environment. So I will see Tenko every once in a while, but he doesn't tell me anything about their plans and I tell him nothing about how UA functions. And if we ever go after the hideout, then I won't help with that. Well, I won't help you find it, but I will help you fight them, Izu told her while using his staff to keep Tenko away. Well, that's quite interesting, but then why are you still willing to fight each other? Shota asked. Because we chose to put our bond as siblings aside and fight as a hero and a villain when we need to, but we will spend time together as a family when we don't need to be on different sides of society. And we can just be a pair of brothers who care about each other, Tenko said. Izu had seen him begin to speak, so he let him get closer so that Shota could hear him. Well, we will need to speak to Nezu about you continuing to spend time together, Shota said. Alright then, now let's give most of our focus to fighting Tenko then, Izu said. He then reached down to his belt and grabbed a small flare from it, and lighting it he threw it up in the air. Suddenly the other three rushed into the fight and began to surround Tenko. Alright Izu, what do you need us to do? Toshi asked. 2 things. 1, don't let him touch you with all 5 fingers or he will disintegrate you with his quirk. 2, for now I just need you to keep him from getting away, Izu told him. Oh Zuku, do you have more people to do your fighting for you? Are you afraid of fighting me alone? Tenko asked. Nope. However, I will use the resources that I have available to me to make this easier for me and safer for everyone else, and if that means that I'm going to use the other people at my disposal, then so be it. I will get all of my classmates and Shota out of this safely, Izu said. Well then, should I make this a challenge then? Tenko asked. How would you do that, Tenko? Izu asked. Kurogiri, bring the Namu here, Tenko said. Oh shit, we are so very screwed unless we have more people. Shota, can you deal with Tenko by yourself once the Namu gets here? And would the rest of you be willing to help me with the Namu? Izu asked, rushing his words knowing that they didn't have much time. Ignoring Denki whisper asking them what the fuck a Namu was. I think that I can. I've been paying attention to how you're fighting him, so I think I can hold my own. Yeah, we can. We trust you to lead us responsibly and with our safety in mind. Alright then Tenko, bring it on, Izu said. In his head he was going over as many plans as he could and also trying to think about how they could fight the Namu with only 4 people. They needed more people to do this, but there aren't more people available, so they would have to make do with what they had. Suddenly the Namu appeared and Tenko immediately gave it orders to kill him. Izu took a deep breath and then broke away from the fight with Tenko and moved a bit farther away so as to not get Shota involved in the Namu fight. He began to give orders to his partners to help distract the Namu while keeping them far enough away from it so it can't hurt them. Izu lashed out at it with his dagger before backing off and watching it to see if it would regenerate or not. When it did, he cursed under his breath because he needed to keep it busy while he got up on top of it to skewer it through the brain so it would die. He really needed more people. Hey Midoriya-kun, do you guys need some help? Sue asked. Why yes, we do need help. Could you help us distract the Namu? Izu called to Sue. Of course I can. I will also help you since I'm available to help and wish to do so, even though I will be of little help in the actual fight, another voice added. Izu turned towards the voice, seeing Momo standing partway across the courtyard. Alright then, could you do support for us? Like making me and Shinso more throwing knives? Izu asked. Yes I can. Let me come over to you so that I can see what your knives look like. I would assume that you and Shinso use the same knives, not different ones, Momo said while making her way over to him. We do, so that should make things a bit simpler for you, less to remember like which belongs to who, Izu told her. When she got over to him, he handed her a throwing knife from his belt and threw the rest of them. Momo made more for him and Toshi and tossed them to whichever one needed them more in that moment, which was usually Izu since he was much faster with throwing them and still hit the target. Toshi took a little longer, but that could be improved with practice. Sue was helping pull people out of the way of attacks when they got too close. Denki was being a good distraction by moving around, so he was the one that Sue was pulling out of harm's way the most often. This went on for a while as Izu was trying to come up with an effective plan to get the Namu distracted long enough so that he could kill it, but most of his plans required more people than he had, and those that worked with the number of people he had were more dangerous and risky for the rest of them than he would like. Fuck you Tenko, you fucking suck. I hate you so much right now, Izu cried out in frustration. He then heard Tenko laughing from where he was fighting Shota. Oi Deku, get out of my fucking way, I'm going to attack it. Bakugo yelled at Izu as he dropped from the sky, attacking the Namu. Alright Bakugo, can I ask you to listen to me and go along with my plans just until we finish this fight so that we can keep everyone safe? Please, Izu asked, almost begging him. Yeah, whatever, just because I think that they're below me that doesn't mean that I want them dead. They aren't completely useless. Shitty Hair is on his way as well. So what do you need me to do, nerd? Bakugo told him, then asked for orders. I need you to distract the Namu until I find a way to eliminate it. I know how to kill it. I just need an opening to do so, Izu told him. Alright then nerd, I'll listen to you for now. I guess you aren't completely useless, you are good at strategy and I can respect that. And Shitty Hair should be useful as a distraction, so let's do this bullshit and make them regret ever messing with you, Bakugo yelled before joining the group fighting the Namu. Izu was kind of surprised that Bakugo had listened to him so easily, but he guessed that it was because even Bakugo knew that he would need to listen to those around him to help others and be a hero. Kirishima joined them after a moment or two, and Izu had him join Denki, distracting the Namo. Izu looked over his own fight and saw that while they had made very little progress, they were mostly uninjured and they weren't losing any ground to the Namo, and he was proud of his classmates for that. But when he looked over towards Shota and Tenko's fight, his blood ran cold. Shota had been injured. Her elbow was a bit disintegrated and one of her arms was broken, but Tenko now had her on her knees and was about to kill her by putting all of his fingers around her neck. Izu threw a knife at him, going straight through his forearm and accidentally cutting Shota below her eye. This action seemed to amuse Tenko, causing him to turn to Izu, smile, then turn back to Shota so he could knock her out and begin to drag her away. "Oh no, you don't, you fucking jerk. You can't have her," Izu yelled at Tenko. "Well then I'll stay here, and if you can beat that Namu then you can have her, but if it kills you, well then it doesn't really matter I guess, so what are you going to do?" "Izuku," Tenko said. "Oh, it's on you, fucking coward," Izu told him. His attention turned sharply onto the Namu, it now being the thing in between him and someone that he really cared about and was not about to lose. The rationality that he would usually use to fight disappeared, and it was replaced with an extremely strong desire to protect those he cared about and a lack of care for how hurt he got in the process. He rushed at the Namu, not noticing that it was hitting him several times, breaking plenty of bones, but he couldn't feel it at all. He grabbed his staff from his belt where he had returned it to when he began to engage the Namu. He tried and failed a few times to get on top of the Namu, but it would throw him off and back onto the ground every time. Eventually, a more rational thought entered his head and he called out to Todoroki. "Hey Todoroki, could you freeze the Namu in place so I can get on top of it?" Todoroki did so for him, allowing him to get up on top of the Namu and then stabbing his staff straight through its brain, effectively killing it on the spot. Izu let go of his staff as the Namu began to collapse. Izu fell off of it, probably breaking a few more bones, and began stumbling towards Tenko and Shota, demanding that Tenko give her back. "Boy Tenko, give me Shota back. She isn't yours, so give her back to me." While Izu was not thinking straight and his hearing was a bit wonky just like his thoughts, he thought that he heard Tenko saying something that sounded a bit like confirmation that Tenko would give Shota back, but he wasn't certain. His consciousness faded, his body collapsed out from under him and he passed out. Hitoshi Shinso's POV. He watched as Izu climbed up on top of the Namu like he knew exactly what he needed to do to eliminate the thing, which would make sense if he was in fact all for one's kid. He almost didn't believe it. Izu was so kind and caring, if not a bit awkward and not super great at socializing, and had some trust issues and had been abused as a kid, and he said that his dad wasn't around at home anymore and ... Oh wait, maybe he meant that his dad didn't live with him and maybe he meant that his parents were divorced. He had said that he had a safe place with people he trusted, that he would never tell him who they were, and would never ask them to take him in. What if those people were his father, brother, and that purple mist guy? They did say that the road to hell was paved with good intentions, so perhaps AFO wasn't such a bad person to his family. His attention was brought back to reality when Izu started yelling at Shigaraki. "Oi Tenko, give me Shota back. She isn't yours, so give her back to me." He was startled that Shigaraki seemed more than willing to give Aizawa back since she was clearly so valuable to them. "Alright Zuzu, you can have your teacher back. I may be a villain, but I am true to my word. I do need to get out of here, but I will leave her here so she can get medical attention along with you," Shigaraki said to Izu. Izu didn't quite seem to understand what was said, and then he collapsed. Hitoshi noticed that Shigaraki had put on gloves at some point so that when he touched things they wouldn't disintegrate if he touched them with all 5 fingers. Shigaraki moved forward and caught Izu before he hit the ground. Shigaraki smiled sweetly at Izu's unconscious body, clearly caring about the boy in his arms, and said something that Hitoshi couldn't quite make out, but it seemed like it was something sweet based off of Shigaraki's expression. Suddenly the door burst open and Ida had returned with several of the teachers. Shigaraki looked up and cursed quietly, which Hitoshi heard since he had been moving over to him for a bit now. He knelt on the floor beside Shigaraki. "Hey Shigaraki, I can take Izu now. You need to get out of here. While you may be a villain, you are still his family, and I don't want people he cares about getting captured," Hitoshi told him. "Alright, then I'll get going. By the way, call me Tenko. I think that you are and will continue to be a valuable friend to Zuzu, so I consider you almost like family. The same with Shota. I can see her becoming a valuable family member someday as Zuzu's other parent," Tenko said. "Okay, I will do that, Tenko. You can call me Toshi. Now get out of here before the heroes catch you," Toshi told him. Tenko stood up and moved away from Toshi and Izu. "Kurajiri, we need to get out of here," Tenko called out to the mist man, whose name must be Kurajiri. The purple mist swirled around him and then it dissipated, leaving neither Tenko or Kurajiri behind. "Young heroes, don't worry, no harm shall come to you while I am here to protect you," All Might yelled. "You're too late. The Namu is dead and the main villains have escaped already," Toshi yelled back. All you can do now is call for the police to come get the villains, and you can go check in every area for the rest of the class and the villains they were fighting, but the most important thing that you can do now is to get Aizawa and Izu to the hospital. Toshi continued. How did they get injured? Why were you students fighting villains? You should have stayed uninvolved. All Might asked Toshi. Well, come down here so I don't need to yell. It's quite hard on my vocal cords. Toshi called up to All Might. All Might came down into the plaza so that they could talk at a normal volume. So why were you young ones involved in the villain fight? It's quite dangerous. Why did Shoto let you all get involved in the fight? All Might asked. Well, none of us really had a choice. We were teleported into the different disaster areas, so we had to fight the villains in the area to stay safe, but a few of us got involved in the plaza fight because Aizawa needed help and Izu knew how to deal. Shigaraki, so he jumped into that fight to help out Aizawa, and myself, Denki, and Shoto got involved because Izu told us to join the fight, but for the most part we just surrounded Shigaraki so he couldn't escape us, and so Izu and Aizawa could take care of him. At one point, Shigaraki summoned the Namu and the students got involved in that fight, and that's when Bakugo, Kirishima, Tsu, and Momo got involved. Aizawa was injured by Shigaraki and Izu lost his composure and attacked the Namu head-on, which he had warned us earlier not to do. That's how he got so injured. Toshi told him. Well, then I do believe that's a valid reason to get involved in a villain fight. The police and medical staff are on their way, so these 2 and 13 will be taken to the hospital soon. All Might told him. All right, thank you. I'm going to stay with them until medical staff arrive. Toshi said. All Might nodded and then moved away to go see if any of the other students were injured or needed help. Sukachi's POV. Sukachi sighed as he walked into the USJ. He had never thought that he would be taking statements from UA students because of much more than some vigilantism when they intervene in situations without their teachers or the hero they are doing work studies under's permission. So really when they step into bad situations to stop them out of habit. But no, now he was taking statements from first-year students who had just survived a villain attack and had needed to fight the villains to keep themselves and those around them safe. He felt bad for these kids. They had to experience what pro heroes did every day. Well, to be fair, this was something that was most likely to happen during raids, not just on patrols. He walked over to the kids who had been gathered in the main plaza so that they could all be counted and so that it would be easier to get statements from since they were all in one place. All right, you all, I'm Detective Sukachi and I will be one of the people taking your statements. I'm the one in charge of taking statements from those of you who were involved in the plaza fight. He told the group. Do you want us to all come with you or will we be pulled from the group individually? The frog-looking girl asked. I will pull you all from the group now and you will give me your statements individually. I will call those of you who were involved in the plaza fights names and I would like for you to come over to me once I call your name. He told them. He pulled the piece of paper that he had been given with the names of the members of the plaza fight. Izuku Midoriya, Hitoshi Shinso, Shota Aizawa, Denki Kaminari, Shoto Todoroki, Momo Yaoyorozu, Tsuyu Isui, Katsuki Bakugo, Ejiro Kirishima. Can you all come with me? Sukachi called the group. They all stepped over to him, but 2 people were missing. Other than Aizawa. Who's missing? Sukachi asked. Aizawa and Izuku are both unconscious and in the hospital, so you will need to speak to them later. Wait, how did you know that Aizawa was missing? The purple-haired kid said. I work at the police station that Aizawa files most of her reports at, so we see each other a lot. Alright then, shall we get started? Let's just go down the list, so if Izuku is unavailable. Let's start with Hitoshi Shinso. Sukachi said. The purple-haired boy stepped forward. Alright then, what do you want me to tell you? Shinso asked. I want you to detail what happened today. Sukachi told him. All day or just the attack? Shinso asked. Just the attack unless something that influenced the outcome of the attack happened earlier in the day. Sukachi told him. Shinso nodded and then began to detail the attack and what he had done as well as most of the actions of those around him. All right, thank you for your statement. Could you go get me Denki Kaminari? Sukachi told him. Shinso nodded and went to get the next student. Hitoshi Shinso's POV. Once he had finished his statement, he went to get Denki so he could go give his statement next. He knew that he had done the right thing by not telling the detective about the relationship between Izu and Tenko, but now he would need to tell the other 2 who had heard the conversation at the plaza that they should omit that from their statement to protect both Izu and Tenko. Hey Denki, you're up next to give your statement. He called to where anyone could hear them. He then continued when he got close enough so that others couldn't hear them. When you give your statement, don't tell him about what we heard concerning Izu's family. It could end poorly for both of them. He whispered. Denki nodded, showing he understood what he was being told, then walked over to the detective to give his statement. Toshi walked over to Todoroki and told him the same thing. He also nodded and told him that he understood. He quickly thought back through the fight and if anyone else had heard anything about their relationship, the answer he came up with was no. He was no longer concerned with the relationship being revealed, so he chatted with Todoroki for a while and Denki joined them once he was finished with his statement. Eventually all of them finished giving statements and they were all led back to the main group. They joined the larger group that consisted of most of their class and continued chatting. Sukachi's POV. He had finished taking statements from the students he had been assigned that were still here at the USJ. He would have to go over to the hospital once the pair had woken up. One of the teachers walked up to him and handed him a white rat bear looking thing. He sighed and asked Nezu what he needed. I simply am here to inform you that we have received confirmation that both Izuku and Aizawa are stable and hopefully going to regain consciousness soon. Nezu told him. Alright, then have them give me a call when both of them are conscious and can be asked to give statements. Alright. Sukachi told Nezu. Will do. Now then let's see if any of the students have any questions about this incident that we can answer. Nezu said. Sukachi turned his attention to the group of kids in front of him and got their attention by clearing his throat. Thank you for your cooperation with us during this time. Nezu would like to answer as many questions of yours as he can to help put your minds at ease. Sukachi told them. Several hands raised to ask questions. Yes, Hagakure. Do you know if Midoriya and Aizawa-sensei are okay? Oh, 13 as well. We got a call from the hospital letting us know that they are all stable and 13 is conscious. Izuku and Aizawa are both still unconscious, however they are expected to wake up soon. If they are ready for visitors tomorrow then you will all be notified. Nezu told them. Good, I'm glad. They were super brave to jump into those fights. I don't think that I could ever do that, Hagakure said. Any other questions? Nezu asked. The students looked around and shook their heads. Nezu told them that they would be sent home once all of the villains had been taken into custody, and the school contacted all of their parents or guardians. Nezu left to tell parents and guardians about what happened and let them know that their kids were being sent home. As the police finished up their work and all the villains who had been captured by the students or by Aizawa-san. Overall, there were about 70 villains who had been captured, which was honestly a better turnout than most raids. The only times raids ever had more captured villains was when they attacked extremely large organizations, and those were quite rare. Nezu returned just after the police finished and told the students that they were free to go and that they would be contacted if Aizawa and Izuku are ready for visitors tomorrow, and that they would be out of school for a bit seeing as they needed to recheck security since so many villains could get in undetected. After the students had left the building, Nezu told Sukachi that Izuku and Aizawa were awake now, so he should go and get statements from the pair. Sukachi thanked Nezu and then headed off to the hospital to talk to the pair. Shota Aizawa's POV. Shota slowly opened her eyes to a bright room that smelled like antiseptic. A hospital then, but why was she in a hospital? She tried to remember why she might have ended up in the hospital, but her memories were fuzzy. As she tried harder to remember what had happened, her memories became clearer and she shot up and immediately regretted it. Her head hurt so much that she almost laid back down, but she simply waited for the pain to subside a bit. As she waited, a nurse came into the room to check on her. Excuse me, ma'am, do you know if any of my students are also in the hospital? Shota asked the nurse. Only one of them is currently here and he has been asking to see you since he regained consciousness. Would you like to see him? The nurse informed her. Yes, I would like to see him, Shota told her. Alright, I will bring him to you, the nurse said, and then she left the room to presumably go get her student. Come to think of it, she had never asked the nurse which of her students was also in the hospital. She quietly hoped that it wasn't one of the kids living with her. However, that hope was dashed when the nurse returned and was escorting Izu into her room. Shota sighed and told the nurse to do what she needed to do, and then she was dismissed. The nurse came over and did whatever her job entailed, which seemed like just checking her vitals. Then she bowed to the pair and dismissed herself. Shota turned to Izu and waited for him to tell her what had happened. I'm sorry, Shota, Izu blurted out. What for, kid? If it's for protecting those you care about, I have no problems with that. If it's for getting hurt, I don't love that it happened, but in this line of work you are bound to get hurt sometimes, Shota told him. Are you sure? I hurt you by accident though. That cut under your eye was made when I aimed too close to you with a throwing knife. I was aiming for Tenko's arm and I hit my mark, but I hurt you as well, Izu exclaimed. That's fine, I would never hold a grudge against you for hurting me by accident. I would assume that Tamura was quite close to my face for you to have even grazed me, Shota told the boy. He was going to grab your neck, which would have killed you if he had put all of his fingers down, Izu told her. Then you really have nothing to apologize for. You saved my life, and I would rather have a scar under my eye as a reminder that someone cared about me enough to give me that scar to save my life rather than be dead, Shota told him. Izu looked at her with guilt still evident, but she could see that some of it had faded from his eyes. So how long have you been conscious for? I was told that you have been asking to see me since you woke up, Shota asked. About an hour. I'm kind of surprised that I woke up first since you were knocked out and I passed out from the injuries I sustained when I got reckless, Izu told her. I see that despite your warning to me before I jumped into the plaza with all of the villains, you yourself didn't listen to your own advice of not taking unnecessary risks. and utilizing your analysis to your advantage. You just attacked the thing based on what you've said so far. Shota told him. Yes, I know I didn't listen to myself. It wasn't smart, I know, Izu said, eyes downcast. Shota sighed, reached over to the boy and lifted his chin so that he was looking at her. Hey kid, you did the right thing and you most likely saved quite a few lives by jumping into that fight recklessly. Now let's learn from this experience and make strategies for what we can do to prevent situations where your best option is to become reckless. Let's learn from this experience and let's grow from it and let's get on with our lives. This experience will never disappear and neither will the scars, but the things we can learn will also never fade. Shota told him. Alright then, now let's get to analyzing what happened. I'll also fill you in on what happened before the plaza and what happened after you were knocked out. Also, when they come for statements, let's not tell them about my relationship with Tenko and the LOV. We will speak with Nezu about it later, but let's not tell the police yet, Izu told Shota. Alright then, shall we get started then? Shota asked, as she said that there was a knock on the door and a voice asking permission to enter. Shota and Izu both called to come in at the same time. The door slid open and Tsukachi walked into the room. Hello Aizawa, pleasure to see you. Although I do wish that it was under better circumstances, but oh well. I'm here to collect statements from both of you, Tsukachi told them. Alright then, let's get started, Shota said. They both gave statements and Tsukachi told them about what had happened to the rest of the students and that they would probably be visiting them in the morning. He then left the room bidding the pair farewell. So you were pretty active throughout the fights. I stopped paying a lot of attention to your fight once it started and I needed to focus on my own fight, Shota said. Yeah, I kind of had to take up a leadership role in my fights, especially with the Namu fight since I'm the only one who knows how to deal with them, Izu said. By the way, what are Namus? I heard you talking about them like there are multiple of them, Shota asked. Oh, a Namu is a person's body who has multiple quirks that were provided artificially. That one, for example, seemed to have a strength quirk, an absorption quirk, and a regeneration quirk. Kurogiri is a Namu as well, although he is much more sentient than the rest of them. From what he's told me about his life, he was a hero student, but he never told me which one, and when I Google him I can't find anything other than how he died. He told me that one of his friends was a lot like me, sleep-deprived, unkempt-looking, analytical, and kind of harsh. He told me that his original quirk is why his teleportation is formed with mist, so his cloud quirk was mixed with teleportation to form what we see now. Also, he said that his quirk was originally blue. He said that he was crushed by a building before Dan saved him. Izu rambled. Hey Izu, do you know the name of the person whose body was used? Shota asked, her voice shaking a bit. Oh yeah, his name was Aburo Shirakumo, Izu said. Shota stopped and stared at the boy in front of her. Hey Shota, you knew him, didn't you? You're the one who I'm really similar to, huh? I'm so sorry, he should have been returned to you, but Dad figured that would be a bad plan since most of Hero Society would now throw him away since he's been associated with villains. He stayed with them while he recovered. If it brings you more comfort, he still knows who he is and who he was, but he doesn't really talk about it. I can bring you with me one day when I go to see my family and you can see him again, Izu offered. Shota nodded silently, still processing what she had just been told. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, then Shota broke the silence by asking about what had happened during the USJ, and they began to analyze what had happened and what could have gone better. They passed several hours like this, and they had discussed most of the events that had transpired with slight interruptions when vitals for either of them had to be taken. It began to get dark and a nurse returned to take Izu back to his room. Visiting hours are over, so you need to return to your room, Midori, the nurse informed them. Izu grabbed the rail of her bed, making it clear that he had no intention of leaving. I would just let him sleep here. He seems to have issues with sleeping alone, Shota told the nurse. Alright then. I'll go tell the other nurses that you will both be in here when they need to take vitals, the nurse said, bowing and exiting the room. Shota turned her attention to Izu, who was still gripping onto the bed railing. Hey Izu, are you okay? Shota asked. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for letting me sleep in here. Once I get used to sleeping around other people, it gets hard to sleep in a room by myself, Izu told her. Yeah, I know how that feels. I also struggle getting used to sleeping alone once you get used to sleeping around other people, Shota said. Well, we should probably get some sleep so that we can recover quicker and we can get out of here and back to school as soon as we can, Izu said. Shota nodded in agreement. Alright then kiddo, get up here. You aren't sleeping in a chair, Shota told the boy. Izu shook his head quickly and looked startled. Shota sighed and repeated herself a bit more sternly. Izu relented and dropped the bed rail so that he could join her on the hospital bed. Shota moved over to the edge of the bed and let Izu settle down next to her, then wrapped her arm around the boy and waited for him to fall asleep before letting herself fall asleep as well. Nezu's POV. He was not having fun. Commission meetings were always boring, but this one in particular is more annoying than usual because he would need to actually fight with the commission a bit to get what he wanted. The students would be safer if they lived on campus, and Nezu had been advocating for on-site dorms for teachers and students for years now, but the commission had always turned him down, citing the evidence that UA had never been directly attacked. Well, that had changed now. The students had been attacked by villains while on UA grounds. "Excuse me, but I have a matter that I would like to discuss," Nezu said, standing up on the platform that was built into the table for him. "What is it you would like to bring to the discussion, Nezu?" one of the commission members asked. "I would like to bring up the possibility of having dorms on UA property. It would allow us to keep the students safer, and it would also allow us to have more availability for outside-of-class tutoring. I would also like to note that the argument that you usually use to refuse me is now untrue. We have had a villain attack on campus and students were targeted," Nezu told them. There was some chatter among the commission members, and they seemed to come to a conclusion. "All right, Nezu, you have permission to have on-campus dorms, but parents or legal guardians must sign off on letting their students reside in the dorms. The students must be allowed to visit family on weekends and over holidays if they choose. And in return, you will allow us to put some new agencies and some independent heroes on the internship and work-study lists," the representative told him. "Deal. I will have homeroom teachers go around and have meetings with the parents," Nezu told them. Shota Aizawa's POV. When Shota woke up in the morning, it was to the chatter of voices. She blinked her eyes open and saw a few of the hellspawn in the room. She looked next to her and she saw that the problem child was still sleeping, so she nudged him awake. "Hey Izu, it's time to get up. Some of your classmates are here to see you," Shota said softly. Izu stirred awake and blinked up at her. Morning, Shota. Did you sleep well?" Izu asked. "Yes, I did. Now Shinso is here, so you should get up and talk to him," Shota told the boy. Izu sat up and looked over at the small group of children who were sitting in the chairs that had been brought into the room for them. Shota looked all of them over for any injuries that remained after the attack, but it seemed that if any of them had gotten injured, they had been healed by Recovery Girl. "So are you two okay?" Denki asked. "Yes, we are fine," Shota told him. "Good. I wouldn't want you to be incapacitated for too long. You still have students to watch over," Todoroki said bluntly. "Yes, I do. I intend to get out of the hospital as soon as I can," Shota said. "Don't be stupid and leave before you're healed fully," Denki said. "Yes, I know. This isn't the first nor will it be the last time I end up in a hospital," Shota told him. "I think more of our classmates will be on their way soon. Nezu sent a group message to us all this morning letting us know that we will be allowed to come see you two today," Shinso tells her. "Lovely." A knock came from the door and Shota sighed but called to them that they could come in. She was a bit surprised to see Tensei walk in, but it made more sense when Ada, or rather Tenya, walked in behind him. "Hey Shota, other than your injuries, how are you? It's been a hot minute since we've seen each other," Tensei said to her. "I'm fine, Tensei. I see that you came with your brother to visit me. You didn't need to do that. You could have come on your own. You don't need an excuse to come and see me in the first place," Shota told him. Tensei laughed and sat down in one of the chairs closer to the bed on the opposite side from where Shinso was sitting. Ada was standing a bit awkwardly by the door, clearly not sure what to do with himself. He then seemed to settle on bowing to her and apologizing. "Aizawa-sensei, I truly apologize for not returning faster with backup. I was too slow to get back and you ended up getting hurt. You as well, Midoriya-kun. I truly apologize from the bottom of my heart and will do better next time." "Alright, Aide Tenya, you have nothing to apologize for. You did the best you could and you still got help in the end. While I do hope that there will never be a next time, I'm certain that in your hero career you will at some point be running for backup. And I'm certain that you can and will learn from this experience, and it will most likely save many lives," Shota told the boy. "Awa Shota, you've gotten so much better at giving advice since we were students. I can still remember me being late with the backup during a training exercise when we were UA students and you simply saying you need to be faster. Next time there may be real lives on the line. You were so blunt and made no effort to make me feel better," Tensei said, quoting something she had forgotten she had even said but sounded so much like her that she had a hard time believing Tensei made it up. "Wow Shota, you were kind of harsh on your friends and classmates back in high school, weren't you?" Izu asked. "Yes, I was far more blunt and never considered that what I said made other people feel bad. I was simply trying to help them see the mistake they made," Shota told him. "I'm certain they saw the mistake. That's for sure," Shinso said, reminding her that she had other students in the room. "Hey, do you all know when the rest of the Hellspawn are planning to come?" Shota asked. "They will drift in and out all day. Most of them have things to do today, so they will drop in when they can. A few are too busy to come today but will come see you in the next few days," Shinso told her. "All right," Shota said. They all chatted for a while and a few more students came and went. Tensei and his brother left after about an hour, and the majority of her students only stayed for around 30 minutes. A few had stayed since they had woken up, and Hagakure had shown up pretty early in the day and had stayed for the rest of it. "Hey Izu, is it fine if Hagakure hears about what happened in the plaza?" Shinso asked. "As long as she doesn't tell the rest of the class," Izu said. They all looked over at Hagakure and she nodded. "I promise I won't tell anyone," She said, "Well then, shall we talk about what you said about Tenko being your brother then?" Shinso asked. "All right. For Hagakura's information, Tenko is Tamura Shigaraki, the villain who attacked us yesterday. He is my brother by adoption and all for one is my biological father. I'm not a traitor, and me and Tenko made a deal that I will not tell him and Dad anything about UAS plans, and they will tell me nothing about the LOV, otherwise known as the League of Villains plans. The only things I know are what I can observe from them when I visit and anything that I had known previously. Much like the information that I have about the Namu and what they are. I will know things about their quirks and I will provide them with an analysis of their quirks just the same as I will do for all of you. If we go after the LOV's base, I will not tell you where it is, and anyone who I bring with me will also fall under the same agreement of not telling the heroes." Izu told them. "Wow, that's quite a lot of information to take in at one time." Hagakure said. "You can say that again." Denki said, "Hey Izu, why didn't you just go live with your father and brother when we got pulled from our living situations? They would have protected you." Shinso asked. "Because I don't think that trying to become a hero while living with the world's greatest villain and the next greatest who the world just has yet to really acknowledge was the best of plans. Besides, I think that being a ward of UA is fine. It means that UA will have my back and they will probably help deal with the bullying from other adults." Izu told him. "Fair enough." Shinso said. "Hey Shinso, how did you two find out about the UA ward system anyway?" Shota asked the boy. "You can just call me Toshi. Oh, by the way, Tenko told me to let you know that he would like you to call him Tenko, and that he can see you becoming a valuable family member as Izu's other parent. But about the UA ward system, we learned about it by knowing where to look on the website." Toshi told her. "All right then. Also, why does he see me as Izu's other parent? He's literally met me once and I was fighting him at the time." Shota asked, confused. "I would guess that he saw that your first instinct was to protect me and give me all of your attention. Once I gave you orders to fight him, he saw how you accepted them immediately and put all of your effort into carrying out what I had asked of you. He also saw how desperate I was to protect you," Izu said, quickly analyzing his brother's behavior and responses during that fight. "Hey, what is your relationship with Aizawa-sensei anyway? I know that I asked about it earlier, but you kinda shrugged me off. If it's something that you don't want to talk about, you don't have to." Denki asked. "No, it's fine. For context, I've been abused and bullied by almost everyone since I turned 4 and was announced quirkless. Shota was the first adult to ever listen to me about the abuse and did something to stop it other than Dad and Tenko. She was kind enough to get us out of the places we lived and out from under the care of the people who were abusing us. Nezu has also promised to take down our former school districts. We currently live with Shota as wards of UA, so we have no real legal guardian except Shota, who can sign forms for us since we live with her, and Nezu can do whatever because we are wards of UA, so he can do any paperwork for us. And if you're wondering why I know my dad and Tenko so well, the LOV hideout was my safe place where Inko couldn't find me." Izu finished. "Well, that's a lot, but at least you have all of us now." Denki said. "Maybe your brother was right and Aizawa-sensei will be your new parent permanently." Hagakure said. "I hope so, but if she doesn't want to, then that's fine." Izu said. "I would love to be your parent. Once we get out of the hospital, if both of you want that, we can sign adoption papers. There are some in my desk drawer at school because Nezu gave me them in a stack of student forms the other day." Shota told them. "I would love that, Shota. I would be happy with that, Aizawa. If you're going to be my kid, you might not want to call me Aizawa. That name will also refer to you soon, kiddo." Shota smiled at the kids, and the other kids in the room smiled and congratulated them. They chatted for a while more, and eventually the rest of them needed to go. Toru, as Hagakure had told them to call her, had turned visible at one point, and she was quite pretty in reality, but she said that she was usually quite happy being invisible. It allowed her to look however she wanted and not be told to brush her hair or need to make sure her makeup was perfect. Shota understood that sentiment and wished that people would leave her alone about her appearance once they noticed her, and she was visible to them. She may not have an invisibility quirk, but she could blend into the background quite well. "All right, see you tomorrow, Aizawa and Izu," Toshi told them. "Yep, see you tomorrow," Izu told him. The rest of the kids left, and Shota and Izu began discussing what they should do to help improve everyone's fighting skills and disaster response when a soft knock came from the door. "You may come in," Shota told whoever was at the door. The door slid open, revealing no one there. Both of them looked down on instinct and saw Nezu standing at the door. "Hello, you two, I have something to tell you, and you will also need to do some social interaction because of it," Nezu told them. "Oh joy. We will have dorms on campus, and you need to go and visit all of your homeroom classes' parents or guardians to have them sign the paperwork for their students to live in the dorms. You will also live in the dorms, as will all of the teachers. You will be able to leave for patrols. Students will be allowed to leave campus after school, but will need to be back on campus by curfew, and they can spend the weekends and holiday breaks with their family," Nezu told them. "All right, once we are released from the hospital, we will go and meet the parents," Shota told Nezu. "Good. School will be out until the dorms are built and the students will move and the day classes resume. Rest will you too, see you when classes start again. Nezu said then left.